Welcome, everyone, to another evening with the Skeptic crew. For tonight, we're going to be watching the Titan battle of Christopher Hitchens versus Dinesh D'Souza. Christopher is a favorite debater of mine who could woo an audience over with his vast array of knowledge and charming wit. So without further ado, let's get to the fun. Woohoo! Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hope everyone's having a good night. Get ready to enjoy some Hitch.
Exactly. How are you guys doing tonight? And I guess, excited for Hitchens?
It's been a while.
I always enjoyed watching whatever clips you showed me of him. I would remember asking you more about him.
Yeah, he's a awesome debater. And I think the great thing about him is you could see how much his debate opponents kind of respect him.
Yeah, he was feared. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we will get to the action. It starts with Dinesh D'Souza giving his opener.
Everything all right?
Yes, I just got to get the sound to work.
Bishop, that was a very gracious introduction. In fact, I think I might have been the only guy sitting up here going, more. I am very pleased and honored to be here. I must say that I love the South, and I mean that in more ways than one. My wife is from Louisiana, and her name is Dixie. We now live in San Diego, and many people don't have a real name. But I'm delighted to be here in Mississippi, delighted to be crossing swords again with Christopher Hitchens and addressing the topic of what is so great about God. Now, here in the Bible Belt, you might feel that this is the Christian capital, you might say, of the world. But actually, it is not so. If you want a capital for Christianity in the world, you're probably better to look at Seoul, South Korea. Or you're probably better to look at a village in Nigeria or a favela in Brazil. The point I want to make here, and it's actually a very encouraging point for those of us who are religious believers, is that religion in general, but specifically Christianity, is spreading rapidly throughout the world. In fact, many people think Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, but it's not true. Islam is the second fastest growing. The fastest growing is Christianity. Islam spreads mainly through reproduction, Muslims having big families. But Christianity spreads through reproduction and conversion. Now, this is a big surprise because just a couple of decades ago, when I was in college, we learned that the world is becoming inevitably more secular. There's a kind of inexorable tide away from belief in God and toward what the philosopher Nietzsche called the death of God, a completely secular society. And the idea was that as countries become more modern, more industrial, more scientific, more affluent, they will automatically become less religious. This was called the secularization thesis, or the secularization expectation. And the interesting thing is it has turned out not to be true. In fact, The only example of secularization that we can point to in a clear way is Europe. It's true, as Europe became more affluent, it did become more secular. But America hasn't gone the way of Europe. And in fact, if you look at the newly modernizing countries of India and China, you find that far from becoming less religious, they're becoming more religious. And in fact, Christianity is spreading very rapidly in countries where it previously had no footing at all. You have African countries that were 1 or 2% Christian 100 years ago, and now they are 50% Christian. So why am I telling you all this? Because it seems to me that one reason we are seeing this new atheism, a kind of attack against God, an attack against Christianity, is not because Christianity is losing, but because it is winning. 25 years ago, the atheists thought we can sit back on our rocking chairs and just wait. The world is going to move in our direction. But now they've realized that's not happening. We've got a counterattack. And so I think the belligerency of these books, the God delusion, God is not great, are a reflection of the fact that atheism has got to, you might say, go evangelical. And what I mean by that is we now have a new phenomenon in our time, and you could call it missionary atheism. The atheist actually wants to get out there and make converts to his or her cause. Now, what's my complaint about all this? First of all, I want to say that in this debate, my idea is to defend Christianity, but without appealing to any Christian premises. In other words, I'm not going to be citing the Bible. I'm not going to appeal to Revelation. You might almost say I'm going to debate with one hand tied behind my back.
Wonder why he doesn't want to bring up the Bible.
Ultimately, I want to engage the secular critique on its
I
own
wouldn't
ground,
either.
which is on the ground of reason. So our debate will be conducted by discussing history and philosophy and science and politics. But at no point am I going to appeal to any kind of Christian revelation. I'm going to appeal, as Christopher Hitchens claims to, on the ground of reason alone. And one of the complaints I want to make is that the atheist today is actually neglecting the huge influence of God, but specifically the Christian God, in shaping the values of our society, even the values that the atheists care about. Let's set aside for a moment Christian values. Let's just look at atheist values.
Yeah, we talked about some of those values last week.
Or
Last
the
stream.
right to
Yeah.
dissent. Or
Atheist
the idea
values.
of toleration, or the equal dignity of women, or the idea of compassion as an important social value, the dignity of life, and so on. The importance of science, which a lot of atheists
The importance of
their thought.
science.
The point I want to make is that these values have assumed the importance that they have in the West, and in fact, in some cases, in the world, because of Christianity. Take, for example, the ideas behind the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal, and out of that comes this entire catalog of rights. And yet Jefferson, who was not a particularly devout Christian, Jefferson generally tended to read his Bible with a friendly pair of scissors, cutting out passages that he didn't like so much and so on. Didn't like the
Every
miracles.
miracle. Yeah.
But on the other hand, when Jefferson sat down to identify the source of our rights, where do these rights, they're supposed to be self-evident. Some people might say they're not evident at all. Where do these rights come from? Jefferson could think of only one source, namely our Creator.
Yeah, it was a political document.
It's because we are created equal,
Also
you
a
may
gun.
say, in the eyes of God.
I'm going to war.
That's why it
I mean,
follows that no
if
man
your rights
has
come
the right
from
to
God,
rule
that's
another man without
pretty
his
shitty
consent.
because he doesn't do anything to actually
That is
give
not
them
only
to you.
the
You have to go out and take them.
Slavery, the
Yeah, I agree.
anti-slavery movement, but you might say it's also the basis of democracy. Modern democracy is based on the idea of what? No man or no person has the right to rule another
Greek democracy.
without consent. Not only have our political ideas, not only do they derive from Christianity, from Jerusalem, you might say, Christianity, and in some cases Judaism before that, but even science has its roots in Christianity. Now, some people will
come
dispute
on
this,
now.
but if you think about it, ask yourself this question: We've had all these cultures in the
Okay.
world, and yet modern science, the scientific method, what Whitehead called the invention of invention, that occurred only in one civilization, namely Western civilization. In fact, it occurred only in the civilization historically called Christendom. Why is that?
What?
Why did science develop here? Aren't there smart people in other cultures who also wanted to figure out stuff? The truth of it is, science developed.
I hate to be that person, but why do they always like ignore the Greek and Roman civilizations, the Indian civilizations, it's another theist, but the Muslim Golden Age, all these, they're like, but Christianity.
But he didn't explain how his Bronze Age book of fables helped them. How did they use that to learn more science?
Yeah, and he also said I wasn't going to use. Did he say he wasn't going to use the Bible? He wasn't going to use Christianity. He said he wasn't going to use the Bible, but now he's just going to say that it's Christendom. That sounds pretty Bible-esque.
Developed in Western civilization because it is based on a Christian assumption. And what is that Christian assumption? It's the assumption that nature or the universe is intelligible. In other words, that nature follows predictable laws. Now you might say, well, that's kind of obvious. That's what science is based on. But if you think about it, it's not obvious at all. Why should nature be lawful? In Christianity, the idea is that we have an omniscient or all-knowing God. So yes, he made...
Let me just stop that. That's not a true dichotomy, because you could say both nature has laws and is chaotic.
But I mean, the laws are descriptive, not prescriptive. It's just men looking at things and seeing how they seem to work. And if you see some always work a certain way every single time, you kind of, that's how things are.
Yeah, we're just trying to build models of reality. It's not really.
It's not like if you drop something, it's not like it's trying to fly away from the Earth and the Earth is pulling it in.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's prescribing intent.
We have God who is a lawgiver. He gave us the 10 Commandments, the moral law.
Well, should we go back to where I'm not going to use the Bible? Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm nitpicking now.
So it's not surprising he gave us the laws of nature.
He had to sneak one or two in.
In some senses,
Yeah,
the intelligibility of the universe is a kind of mystery. Let me give you an example of what I'm getting at here.
Like they do at courthouses.
One of the central laws of science that light travels at the speed of 186,000 miles a second in a vacuum. That's one of the central laws of science.
Perhaps he won't quote or refer to any scripture explicitly, but he'll make vague references like you just did.
It could be. Could mean he wasn't going to quote scripture. He was just going to use concepts. But once again, we're getting pretty Bible-esque.
It's
triggering my atheism.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know
Bible.
how long I can handle.
You're perfectly fine, Sam.
I'm probably just not gonna say anything the entire time while this thing is playing. And I do want to listen to it, but I can't do this. I just need to sleep.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And I did my makeup and everything. Yeah, believe me, I'm mad. Oh, God damn. I'm getting older. Okay. Have a good one, y'all.
Night, Sam.
Good night, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo. Shall we continue?
Yep, let's go ahead.
Well, how do we know that? We can measure the speed of light. You can measure it 1 time or 10 times or 1,000,000 times. Who cares? How do you know that in a galaxy 10 light years away, light travels over there at that speed? Has anybody measured it over there? No. We're simply guessing that because light is measured traveling at a certain speed over here, it must travel at the same speed over there. And not only that, but we assume that light that travels 10,000 years ago or even 5 billion years ago, light also traveled at the same speed, although there's absolutely no way to verify that. So how do we know that? We're assuming a lawful cosmos.
I mean, we have no reason to think otherwise. So
You see
Yeah.
right away how this assumption is immediately called into question. The great Muslim thinker Al-Ghazali says human beings can follow laws. If you're driving on a street, you see a stop sign, you stop. But that's because we are intentional and purposeful agents. He says, how can inanimate objects follow laws? How can an electron know what to do? And Al-Ghazali says the whole universe exists in the mind of Allah. Everything happens at every second because Allah wills it to be so. There's no other way it can happen.
that's like your friend we talked to before, the fire guy, the color guy. Who is that? What was his name?
I'd have to look it up, but
Because remember he kept on saying that that everything is just in God's imagination.
yes, and it's
And that's just what
fire
Dinesh
and
just said about
colorful
his mom.
fire.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I guess that is a common theme, but I get the whole light and trying to be mystery and light behind a cloud and all that, but metaphorical, colorful language.
Only in Western civilization, it's only in the orbit of Christianity that we have this idea of a rational, intelligible, lawful, mathematical universe. And while people often talk about science as opposed to Christianity, if you were to make a list of all the great scientists of the last 300 years, a list that would surely include people like Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler and Leibniz and Pascal and Boyle and Newton, you'll discover that the vast, vast majority of these scientists not only believed in God, but most of them were specifically Christian. So Christianity, in a sense, is the author, not only of many secular values, but also of the science that is today invoked against Christianity. I've spoken a little bit about the legacy of Christianity. I have a lot of material to cover and my time is so limited. So I need to adopt the motto that King Henry VIII used with one of his wives. He said, I can't keep you too long. So I need to fast forward a little bit. And now I want to talk, if I may, briefly about morality. And I want to try to show that one of the things that's great about God is God ultimately is the moral lawgiver of the universe. The first thing I want to show is that morality is universal. This is
No, it's not.
obvious. We all have, if you can. By the way, some people think we get our morality from the Bible, but that's not strictly true. I tried to remind myself when
Well, thank goodness for that, right?
Did I read the Ten
Yeah.
Commandments and say, oh, let me see, stealing is wrong? Wow, unbelievable. I had absolutely no idea. Killing is wrong. That's another big surprise. No, the truth of it is when I read the Ten Commandments, I already knew them. I already knew. The Ten Commandments is not an inventor of morality, it's a codification of it. Really, morality is the voice within, what Adam Smith calls the impartial spectator inside of us. And all of us have morality. I was speaking on the campus the other day. I said, look, if we were to bring a little dog into this room and Christopher Hitchens were to get up and start stomping on it, there would be a tremendous wave of revulsion throughout the room. And someone in the audience shouted, well, what if it's a cat? I said, well, then we'd all be equally entertained. But nevertheless,
Ha ha ha.
the point is when we acknowledge within us the existence of a moral law, remember that law
What happened?
Cannot come from nature. And here's why.
Just realized I was muted. But can I just say how many times that he has said the word law? Like I was counting like 4 or 5, maybe more at this time, including lawful cosmos and lawgiver and
That's his
law,
safe
law,
word.
law. Yeah, that seems to be his safe word.
Nature is simply a description of what is the case. Nature is a description of reality as it is. Morality is a description of reality as it ought to be. And that's two very different planes of existence, the way things are and the way things ought to be. Nature supplies the former, but it does not supply the latter. So what is the source of morality? Where do we get this little voice of conscience inside ourselves that seems to speak with unimpeachable authority? I mean, we can dispute our conscience. One of my friends says, I'm always wrestling with my conscience and I usually win. But what he's trying to say is my conscience is an acknowledged authority. I might not go along with it, but I don't dispute the unimpeachable power of what it has to say. And my point is, what is its source? I think it makes more sense to think of conscience as transcendent, which is having, you might say, a non-natural or I would say supernatural source, than to try to account for it in natural terms, which is simply to confuse the way things are with the way things ought to be.
So it's not going to work the same way everything else works. It's going to be something different.
Of God and for belief
Something
in God
special.
that I think we would do well to consider, particularly if we are not strong atheists, but you might say sitting on the fence. Or we're Christians, but we're not really sure why we believe what we do, whether it makes sense. I want to conclude with an argument that was raised by the philosopher Pascal. And Pascal makes the point, how am I doing on time? Fine. Pascal makes the point that in life,
Fantastic.
we have to make decisions even though we don't always have full information. Years ago, when I got engaged to my wife, I said to myself, I don't think I should give her the ring. Why?
Oh, did he?
Because I'm really not sure what life with this girl is going
Yeah,
to be 40 years.
he booked into a hotel with another woman, said it was his fiancée. Then they said, oh, hey, aren't you still married? He's like, oh, yeah, we separated. We're not divorced yet.
Oh, there you go. Once again.
Whatever, it's his personal life, but he lost his job at the college he was at because, he basically left his wife for a younger woman, which is kind of frowned upon in the church.
Oh, yeah. And no, I wouldn't judge anybody for anything for that kind of stuff. It's just funny because it's normally the other way around. It's normally we're going to be against divorce up until the point that this relationship isn't working anymore. And then it's like, you know what? I feel like there needs to be a reformation in my head. And it's so funny how people's views change. Just like when their son, it's very easy to be against gay marriage until you find out that you have a gay son. And then it's like, you know what? I kind of did want grandkids. And
yep. Yeah.
I should wait
Christian
for
morality.
But then I realized even if we date for another year or 5 years, I still won't know.
I believe your time is up, Mr. D'Souza.
I'll pick this up in my rebuttal. Thank you very much.
Well, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, brothers and sisters, comrades, friends, for coming. I'd like to exempt myself from the chairman's kind offer of protection. You don't have to demonstrate Southern courtesy to me. I've had enough of it all day. Everyone's been almost stupefyingly polite and gentle with me. So if anyone wants to get rough, they might find that I was ready to play. Second, I want to explain a little riddle in the introduction about Mrs. Watts, my first and in many ways my best teacher when I was 9. She was my nature teacher in a lovely little school in the west of England. She was also my scripture teacher. So she would take us on nature walks, show us the beauties. Then she would do us search the Gospels. And everything would have been fine if this lovely lady hadn't overreached one day and tried to combine her 2 roles, tried to fuse them. And on a nature walk say to us, look, children, how beautiful and green all the vegetation is, the trees, the grass, the leaves, and how good that makes God, doesn't it? How kind also it makes him, as well as how powerful. Green is the color most restful to our eyes. And God could have made it mauve or orange or purple if he'd wanted to, and there'd have been a terrible clash and wouldn't have been so comfortable. And I was 9, and I knew nothing about chlorophyll or photosynthesis or evolution by natural selection or any of these things, but I remember thinking, that's nonsense. The eyes have adapted to the environment, not the environment to the eyes. And from that moment onwards, I've been able to see through all arguments from design, however subtly they're put, or by however clever a person. Now, the subtitle of my book is that religion poisons everything, and some people come up to me and say, or ask me at meetings like this, come on, lighten up, can you be serious? Everything? Do you really mean everything? I mean, Italian cooking, fried green tomatoes, chess, tantric sex, whatever. And yes, as a matter of fact, I do mean to say this, because I think that the religious cult, the impulse to worship, in other words, the impulse to displace ourselves onto a higher and unalterable authority, in some way attacks us in our very deepest integrity, and it threatens to take away from us what is our most precious as well as our most worrying and anxiety-making thing, which is our need for responsibility, our need to accept it for ourselves, and our wish to be free, contrasted with our wish, very frequently and very noticeably expressed, our wish to avoid responsibility and our fear of being free. And it's the latter 2 things, it seems to me, that religion caters for. We're offered in religion the chance to have our sins not just forgiven, but taken away from us altogether. We're offered the chance to throw them on somebody else. We're offered what I consider to be the horrible and rather immoral doctrine of vicarious redemption, whereby it's as if you never sinned in the first place. It's not like having your debts paid. It's not like
That's
having
what you're always talking about.
made up for you. It's as if you've been cleansed, as
Yeah.
if you never did it. This is an absurd abandonment of responsibility.
The sins
it
of
takes
someone
the form, an
else.
unpleasant form, well known to the peasants of antiquity, of scapegoating. You simply throw it all onto another party and make that party, sometimes an animal, sometimes a human sacrifice, bear these sins away. Out of this kind of ritual, and out of
Oh, and can I just say how surprised they often are when I bring up the ritual thing? Do you find that surprising? Do you find it surprising that they're surprised?
I don't know. I guess maybe it's just something they don't hear very often. When you're challenging the animal sacrifice or talking about Jesus dying on the cross.
Just the entire notion of trying to replace an animal or a human for our bad deeds. A literal scapegoat. I always come back to that. Though I should keep on just playing Christopher.
I think it's just something they don't really think about very often. They just assume it for granted,
Indeed. And it's funny, it gets reinterpreted to be, in their eyes, beautiful. I can see it when they talk about it. They say how he sacrificed, and to me it's an equivocation fallacy. It's saying, sure, when you go out of your way to sacrifice for the better, like people who go to war, but then that's a little bit different than saying we're gonna kill some guy and it's going to undo all. Turns out I slept with Deborah, and my wife found out, but it's okay. We killed this rabbi, this very, very perfect rabbi.
Well, I guess that makes it okay.
Makes it okay. It's all right, Deborah. We got this.
Of this kind of negation of responsibility, it seems to me, we have to grow. So that's the first point. It denies us our moral autonomy. It is said that we need God for morality, or perhaps I shouldn't caricature my opponent's position. It is said that without some appeal to the divine, to religion, we would not ourselves be able to tell a right action. We wouldn't know how to ground ourselves ethically. We wouldn't know right from wrong. We wouldn't know precisely how to make the distinctions. I believe the contrary is the case. I believe that my mother's ancestors, if they ever did really spend all that time getting to Mount Sinai, which I think is, by the way, a mythical story, but never mind, let's take it as true for now, would not have got there and would not have got that far if they'd been under the pre-existing impression that adultery, perjury, murder, and theft were all fine. It's rather from religion, from us, excuse me, from human solidarity, from the knowledge that all societies have, that they cannot possibly evolve if they countenance murder or perjury or theft. That religion takes its morality. The stuff that's in the Ten Commandments, Dinesh, that isn't to do with human morality, is often highly immoral. For example, it's forbidden even to covet other people's goods or achievements. And by the way, among their goods are included their wives, their womenfolk, who are lumped in with chattel, which goes to show that these commandments are created by men and not by gods. They're created by the agricultural and masculine values of the time. It's not a small point, but there's nothing, for example, to condemn the abuse of children. There's only a vague demand that parents be respected. After all, this is coming from, apparently, a father. There's nothing against racism. There's nothing against slavery. There's nothing against genocide, partly because in these and ensuing chapters, all those things, racism, genocide, slavery, are actually going to be not just recommended, but enjoined, made an actual injunction on the children of Israel. They're going to be told to do these things. So it seems to me very obvious that what is known as religious morality is partly man-made, and it shows. It shows that it's made by a greedy and cruel, partly evolved, fairly highly evolved, let's not run ourselves down too much, primate species that turns out on examination to be, as we now know, 1/2 chromosome away from a chimpanzee. Well, the other objection, and it comes out of this one, is that religion gives us a false picture of moral reality. If it were true that religion was the source of morals and ethics, then you'd have to be able to answer the following two questions that I'm going to pose to you, and take your time to answer them, and we have plenty of time to discuss this when we move to the public phase of this evening. You have to name for me a moral action committed or an ethical statement made by a believing person, by a person of faith, that I couldn't make as an unbeliever. Okay? I've challenged the Archbishop of Canterbury on this in public, and many other spokesmen of many religions. I've not yet had a persuasive answer. You have time. Think of something I can't do that's moral, or I can't say that's moral or ethical, because I'm not a believer. Take your time. Now there's a corollary question. Think of a wicked thing done, or an evil thing said by somebody purely because they are a person of faith. You've already thought of one. You don't need any prompting from me. The suicide murder community is almost entirely faith-based. The genital mutilation of children is exclusively religiously motivated. Sins that hadn't been thought of before, things that we've hardly had time to think of condemning, are actually advocated by men of God, and often in the name of God, as a matter of obedience to his will. So just bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you do want things to get a little warm later on, that I, for one, will take it as extremely insulting if any person of faith makes the assumption that their faith gives them a moral edge on me. I want to hear a lot more apologizing from the faith-based communities for the evil that they've done before they even start clearing their throats and telling me I wouldn't know right from wrong without their permission. I'm sorry, I can't be spoken to in that tone of voice, and nor should any of you. On with the false picture of reality. Religion has its grandeur. The reason why this discussion is always so interesting, always so worth having. The magnificence of religion comes from the fact that it was first. It was our first attempt. It's our first attempt to make sense of the cosmos, our first cosmology, our first attempt at philosophy. In many ways, and in some of the books, our first attempt at literature and poetry. In some ways, our first attempt at medicine, even at physics, at all the sciences and some of the arts. This was humanity's first fumbling attempt to look at the sky and see where it fitted in. All credit to religion for trying this. Someone had to. But because it was the first, it is also in many ways the worst. What happens when you don't have a germ theory of disease and you wonder where the plagues are coming from? Well, you either think they're a punishment from God, or you think, depending on how far we've gone along into the medieval years of religion, they come from the Jews poisoning the wells, or from witchcraft, or from people not going to their prayers enough. The same about natural phenomena like earthquakes or floods. There must be a supernatural explanation for things that, of course, we now know can be much better and more accurately explained for us. So the fact that we are still burdened by the false picture given of reality and of nature by religion is, I think, not the smallest of the indictments against it. You still hear at times like Katrina or the Pacific tsunami, you will still hear men of religion, including in civilized and advanced and educated countries such as England, the bishops saying this is because of sin that there is an inundation. And out of this, it seems to me again, we must teach ourselves as developed humans, evolving humans, to grow. There are essentially two choices once we've got past the fearful childhood and the terror with which we had to face reality in those days.
It happens.
We can either say of ourselves and to ourselves that we are here because of a divine design, or we can admit that we are here because of processes we don't fully understand, but that are cosmological in the first instance, the Big Bang, and Darwinian, to give it a shorthand, the consequence of evolution by natural selection and random mutation in the second. Now, it's an interesting thing that religion now wants, having fought very strongly against cosmology, having fought against any discovery that threatened the idea of a man and God-centered Earth that was itself the center of the solar system, that was itself the center of the universe, and having fought very hard and still fighting against the idea of evolution by natural selection. The great thing about being religious is this: when the evidence against you becomes overwhelming, and you can see the amazing intricacies of the Big Bang,
Flip
and
the script.
Extraordinary matter of the Hubble red light shift and the things we can now see through Mr. Hubble's telescope. And when you see the extraordinary variety of species, religion says, come to think of it, that is true. In fact, it shows that God was even more ingenious than we had thought him in the first place. What's my objection to this kind of argument? Well, of the many I could make, the first is simply this: it's completely impossible to refute.
It's once again, the heads I win, tails you lose. You know, if we can't find a reason for life, like abiogenesis, well, then it's a god. Though, you know, if we do find a reason for life, it's kind of like that came from a god. So, win-win, at least in their eyes.
Yeah, all they've done is
Every time any new evidence comes,
repackage their God claims to what they think is unfalsifiable.
Yeah, so, well, that's where their favorite arguments go, because if it's unfalsifiable, then you can argue that forever.
right? It's claimed for, well, it fits with the unoverthrowable theory that we already had. Some of you will have been taught already, I hope, that a theory that can be described as unfalsifiable is, to that extent, a very weak theory. And that seems to me to apply with overwhelming force to the religious or godly explanation of our presence here and the natural phenomena around us. I can imagine a little pressed for time. Can you give me a rough idea? Okay, that's not long. I'm going to be very quick and say what I've been implying, and I was going to lead up to a bit more slowly, which is that this referring upwards of these questions of responsibility, of freedom, of inquiry, this referring upwards of them all the time to a celestial authority is, in my opinion, as well as futile intellectually, potentially very sinister, because what it suggests is that we are governed by a kind of celestial dictatorship, by an unanswerable to unchangeable authority in the sky that can watch us, keep us under permanent surveillance, keep us permanently under watch, can convict us of thought crime, can guard us while we sleep, and that carries on this process of surveillance and supervision even after we are dead. It seems to me this would be a horrible thing if it were true. It would be worse than any known tyranny has ever been. But that in itself puts me in mind of something, which is that most of the tyrannies under which humans have labored in the past and continue to labor under in the present have in their essence been theocratic. Because once you can give to any other group of mammals and primates, any other group of humans who are essentially no better than you, the right to say that they speak in God's name, that they know God's will, that they have God's authority and God's permission, then there is no limit to the kind of totalitarian misery that can be inflicted on you in the real world, in the very few years of existence and life and potential freedom that we absolutely know for a sure thing we do have, that are not part of the metaphysic, but that are our common property, are our birthright. And this has been true since the early theocratic tyrannies of the Aztecs, the Babylonians, through to the idea of the tyrannies of feudalism and monarchism against which the American Revolution was mounted, to many of the terrible 20th century tyrannies, fascism, Hitlerism, the South African system of apartheid, which was a branch entirely of the Dutch Reformed Church and its belief that there was a divine mission on their side, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is shortly to get its own apocalyptic and Armageddon weapon, and other threats which make me think, and I'll rest my case here and wait for rebuttal, make me think that the battle against the religious illusion is part of a very important battle, not just for human emancipation, but actually potentially, if not really imminently, also for human survival, and therefore a battle that we dare not lose. Thank you.
Well, that was a good opening from Hitch there.
Woohoo! So yeah, I was gonna say, what were your thoughts with the two openers?
I mean, from Dinesh, it was pretty much similar to like the same kinds of things that you hear from any other Christian apologist. Personal anecdotes, a lot of things like that. And Hitchens giving a few reasons why God's not that great, which are pretty obvious. What about you?
Well, I like his doubling down on, as he always does with religion, poisons everything. It is always interesting, he went over how it was our first attempt at science. We were really just trying to figure out, because they always like to bring up credit how, we're here, or we have, turn this back on, how we have all of our Western civilization and all this because of Christianity, but that's not really true. It's really a hush-posh of why we're here. Just like I did, they always try and say that democracy came from Christianity, but democracy, I don't know if representative democracy came from the Greeks, but the Greeks and the Romans had a senate, and a lot of the, at least they were building on the beginnings of what we have now.
Yeah, and what they don't tell you is they like to talk about these branches of science being founded by Christians, and comments similar to that. What they're not telling you is, if if you go back like as far as maybe the mid to early 1700s and before that, very few people, actually almost nobody, you actually couldn't question Christianity in a lot of places. It just was not acceptable to do. You know, if you were a scientist, the idea of testing something in the Bible to see if it was true was, you know, a sacrilege, because you should just assume it's true just because that's what the Bible says. You don't have to go out and find evidence for it. But, you know, when a few of them got a little bold and they decided, you know what, let's go out and see what we find when we start looking at the natural world. And they did that from a Christian mindset. And lo and behold, they started putting Bible claims to the test. And a lot of the times it failed.
Yeah, and it's a common theme with religion is that there's pushback whenever it goes against any of the scripture or core beliefs. The science takes the back seat. It's nice up until it contradicts something, and then it gets chucked.
And then science, they're, you know, the scientific method's a great thing, and science does a lot of good things for us, but a lot of times they aren't necessarily very bold in challenging authority. So they'll do their science, but they'll kowtow to the political establishment that's in charge at the time. They're not really going to challenge, you know, the state based on, you know, a scientific discovery. They'll wait for the rest of the people to catch up to them.
The Inquisition and other things, and Galileo, and a whole bunch of others come to mind. And all right, and I just want to say I'm sending lots of love to the chat.
We accidentally let Mr. D'Souza go over time for 3 minutes. So Mr. D'Souza will have a 5-minute rebuttal, and then we'll even that score by giving Mr. Hitchens an 8-minute rebuttal.
He won't need 5 minutes.
In Christopher Hitchens, as you heard, we have a formidable advocate for atheism. I think one made even more formidable by his impressive Richard Burton accent. I do want to begin by challenging a couple of the specific claims that he made, because I think that in these debates, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we're not entitled to our own facts. He began by saying that he challenged Christians or anyone to state a premise from within religion that is exclusive to Christianity that would not be or could not be advocated, I suppose, consistently or in reason by an atheist. And I have an answer for that. It's simply Christ's principle or injunction to love your enemy. Now, obviously, any atheist can say that, but it makes absolutely no evolutionary sense. The whole point of evolution is to wipe out your enemy, who is a threat to your survival and the perpetuation of your genes. Yes, you might make temporary bargains with people for your own gain, but the idea of universal brotherhood, of taking care of the stranger, of pure altruism, of loving even those
I was just going to say that's what he's trying to attack, altruism, saying there's no evolutionary benefit for it. So it had to be supernatural.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense to me. Altruism, from a game theory perspective, is highly successful. I never understand why they seem to have a problem with people doing good deeds without someone watching you. It is possible.
Yeah, evolution is smart enough to take more into consideration than what you're doing at one moment in time. You know, it's capable of analyzing the big picture and finding out, you know, benefits for, you know, people who are kind and gentle and loving to other people. You know, tend to be liked more. People tend to be willing to share more with them than someone who's, you know, a dick.
Yes, and it feels good. There are a lot of good reasons to say when you give someone a gift or something, you get a bunch of chemicals in your brain,
Yeah.
you imagine them
The
liking it.
oxytocin.
Exactly.
You
There's
get
good
a rush of
evolutionary
oxytocin.
reasons for altruism and morality.
One in good conscience could. Christopher Hitchens also said that suicide bombing is a religious patent, and that is actually not true. The most notable of the suicide bombers of the last century were the Japanese kamikazes, who were doing it not for religious reasons at all, but because of political dedication to the emperor.
Yeah, we're not talking
and
about that.
a kind of Japanese chauvinism and nationalism.
When was the last time a Japanese guy flew a plane into something?
Yeah, but that's also a little religious too. They thought he was a god, I believe, or they at least.
Yeah,
It is the same mentality.
yeah, as
Is
close to a
war.
living god as you could get, you know.
Exactly. It reminds me of when they bring up North Korea. But North Korea also, they come out with a bunch of propaganda that says that, he scored 12 holes in one or whatever, and it starts becoming quasi-religious.
They deify the leader. You know, they do nothing wrong. They're
Exactly.
perfect.
Up until they get ousted. And then, the new person does nothing wrong.
Yep, then the new person's infallible.
Tamil tigers, who are the
Exactly.
inventors of the modern form of suicide bombing, happen to be Hindu, but their suicide bombing has nothing to do with that. It's ultimately driven by nationalism and tactical moves in a way to gain territory and power. So an attempt to simply take these actions and ascribe religious motives, even when none are present, I think is a little bit dubious. Even if you look at religious conflicts around the world, the Hindus and the Muslims aren't really fighting about religion, they're fighting about Kashmir. The Israelis and Palestinians aren't really fighting about God, they're fighting about land. So there's an effort here to blame religion for things that often have little or nothing to do with it. Then Christopher Hitchens gave a very memorable example of his teacher talking about why we like green stuff like pastures and blue stuff like oceans. And his own ingenious observation is that we have adapted to nature and not nature to us. In those two rather pathetic examples, I think his
What?
logic holds. But if you go further, you see that his teacher's argument is completely valid. Let's say his teacher would have framed it somewhat differently. Not that we happen to like green pastures, but aren't we fortunate to live on a planet where the sun is 8 light minutes away? If the sun happened to be further away, it would be too cold to sustain life. If the sun happened to be a little bit closer, we would scorch to death. Oh, isn't it lucky that in our constellation we have a large planet strategically placed like Jupiter, which vacuums up wandering asteroids and meteors and prevents large lethal objects from hitting the Earth?
This is the puddle
There's a whole
argument.
scientific literature on this.
Yeah, the fine-tuning case.
Nothing to do with
Because
Darwinian selection.
if we couldn't,
It's ludicrous to say that the
if we couldn't be here, we wouldn't be here, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, how amazing is it that we're here? Also, they do this thing with the habitable zone. The habitable zone is not, it's small, but it fits planets like Mars. Mars
Yeah.
is within the habitable zone just like we're in. They just lost their magnetic I'm trying to remember the exact word, but they lost their shield to protect them slowly over billions of years. But they possibly could have had life, and were but it seems, were they not holy, even though they were in the habitable zone?
I think Venus is actually in the habitable zone too, because they've been questioning whether there could be forms of life in the clouds of Venus. I know they've
It could be.
conjectured about it. Probably not on the surface. It's too hot because of the runaway greenhouse effect. But
Yes.
But it is conceivable that forms of life could evolve.
But I guess the point is that they just, were We're awesome. The planet is amazing. I'm kind of attached to this thing we call Earth. I've been a fan ever since I started here, but at the same time, it's not. The universe is big, and there's a lot of amazing, awesome things going on, and so it's it's great to appreciate what we've been given. That doesn't mean that it was given to us for us.
Yeah, you'd have to show a little bit more evidence of that.
Exactly.
Because the dog and the wolf has a common ancestor, it has nothing to do with that. We're talking about the conditions that made evolution itself possible, the conditions that make it possible for life itself to exist on this earth.
Hey,
And then if you
biogenesis
say, well, we just
incoming.
happen to live on a lucky planet, no big deal. There are billions of planets and stars out there. The truth of it is the universe requires certain numerical constants for life to exist. The physicist Stephen Hawking, in his book A Brief History of Time, gives one very revealing example. He says that if the rate of expansion of the universe from the time of the Big Bang differed, not by 10% or 1%,
Yeah,
but
fine
1
tuning.
part in 100,000 millionth million,
We wouldn't be
we would
here.
have no universe, we would
Oh
have
my
no
God.
life. This is an
Shame.
argument for design at a completely different level.
They love to manipulate figures and
well-meaning English teacher. It's an
Anytime you hear an argument that goes, "Did you know that the chance was 10 to the 10 billion billion?" You're like, okay.
argument that says
I mean,
planet, but the
every lotto ticket has like a 1
and
in 40 million chance of winning or 200 million chance of winning. Each one is very, very unlikely to win, but sometimes people still do win. Go figure.
Yes, and people seem to have no appreciation for the fact that rare events happen all the time. That, yes, exactly. A lottery ticket's almost a perfect example because the odds of someone winning a lottery ticket, and if you just say, should I play the lottery from a statistical vantage, the answer would be no, because you're not, chances are you're not going to win it, but someone wins it. There is someone out there every day that wins a giant jackpot. So rare events happen. It doesn't mean it's a miracle.
So if I said to you, Amy, pick me a number between 1 and infinity, whatever number you pick would be infinitely improbable to be your selection, but you had to choose one, right?
Yeah, it could have been 37,462,000,000. Could have been.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't.
1 out of the infinity. So that number that you came up with must be divinely inspired from God.
It was. It was.
Because of all the
given
other
to
numbers
me.
you could have picked, you picked that one.
And you know what? I think I should bet my entire year's salary. I think I should go right there and just go, I'm ready. I'm ready for it. Come on, Jeebus. I'm all in.
as old as it is in order for us to be here having this conversation. This, I think, is an argument that needs to be answered, and I'll wait to see whether it is. I want to make a final point in my time about my own time. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Eight minutes. Mr. Hitchens will have 8 minutes, timekeepers.
Okay, well, I'll do it directly because this is starting to be fun. I don't want to change the goalposts, of course, but I don't actually think that loving your enemy is always a moral injunction. There are some enemies I don't love and I don't think I should. It's not my right for people who might want to kill you and your children or kill my children. It's not my right to love these people. It's my duty to destroy them, to defeat them. There's nothing moral about saying, let them have their way, turn the other cheek. That would simply be my political, my secular, rather than my theological view. But I do think there is a problem with the rest of what Dinesh said on this point. The other injunctions about love, and we'll stay just with Christianity for the moment. A problem I always had with it was was compulsory love. Not you're compelled to love your neighbor, or even not just to love him, but to remember to love him or her as you love yourself, an injunction that actually cannot be obeyed. Nobody with any integrity and self-respect can have the same regard for another person as he has for himself and perhaps his family. It's not to be expected. It's more than can be demanded. It's a work of supererogation. And it has the sinister corollary that because you know you can never quite do it, you're always falling short. You must always flagellate yourself for failing to come up to this magnificent idea. You're always going to be guilty again. You can't possibly be right. You're always in a state of sin. And this has the connotation again of the totalitarian, a law you cannot obey. Further, you're supposed to return this love to someone who is your creator. And you're told, in addition to being compelled to love this person, you must also fear him. Is there not a problematic element here? Compulsory love for a being, a supreme being, of whom you must also at all times always be in fear. When I think of this, the image I get is of George Orwell's Big Brother in 1984, where adoration is extracted from people who are in a state of holy terror. It doesn't seem like morality to me. Now, the so-called golden rule, that we should have the same consideration for others that we expect them to have for us, is a very fine rule in its way. It has a limitation I'm about to mention, but it's a decent enough rule, and it's not hysterical, and it's not totalitarian, and it doesn't demand the impossible of people. Don't do to another what would be repulsive if they did it to you. We know that that was said by Rabbi Hillel long before Christianity, Babylonian rabbi. Something almost exactly in that form of words also appears in the Analects of Confucius. So it predates monotheism altogether. Some such idea is obviously innate to us. It's commonsensical. The limitation, I'll just mention it conversationally, is it's a rule that's only really as good as the person who's uttering it. The person who's uttering it must be a person of average moral character, because there are many people. Let me think of an example. Well, Charles Manson, for example. It's ludicrous for me to say of him that I don't want anything done to him I wouldn't want done to myself. Obviously, I want different things to happen to Charles Manson. I don't judge it by what I think I'm entitled to. So the rule is in danger of becoming tautologous and of breaking down. And that's why I don't think that there are, in that sense, religious or moral absolutes. And why it never makes any sense to say that we wouldn't know right from wrong if we couldn't refer it upwards to the unseen celestial court. There will always, unfortunately, be ethical and moral approximations, and that's part of the curse of our mammalian condition. Now, I deliberately did not say that suicide bombing, I think the record will show, was an exclusively religious monopoly. I said it was almost exclusively a religious monopoly, because I know myself about the Tamil Tigers, and I agree with what Dinesh said about that. I said the genital mutilation of infants community was exclusively religious. But if I'd been going to make an exception on the suicide murder and suicide bombing one, I wouldn't have chosen the Japanese kamikaze. After all, their emperor was a god in Japan. Japan was one of the most completely theocratic of the three countries that made up the Nazi-fascist axis. The emperor was, until he renounced his divinity, rather conveniently in 1945, a god. So anyone committing a kamikaze action was doing it to please the divinity. Just a point I don't think that is negligible. How much time do I have about Jupiter protecting us from meteors? Oh, that's all right. Well, we wouldn't be here if meteors didn't come smashing into the Earth at fairly regular intervals. It's almost certainly only because of a titanic meteor strike, probably on the Yucatan Peninsula, that the dinosaurs got out of the way, and the hitherto small, squeaking, frightened mammals that had been under their hoofs were able to evolve a bit and get on with becoming human. But if you're going to say that that physics and evolution are evidence of some divine design, here are some of the difficulties that you're going to have to face. First, whether or not there used to be nothing and there's now something, and that something is the miracle, however we resolve that, we do know one thing for absolutely sure. Our something is very soon going to be replaced by nothing. The Hubble red light shift, some of you will know about it, used to postulate that the Big Bang means that we're exploding away faster than we had thought from the original source. That matter is flying apart. The observable universe is flying apart much more quickly than we had thought. It was then thought for Newtonian reasons, well, that's going to slow down. The rate, at least, will slow down. The recent discoveries by a great physicist named Lawrence Krauss have shown to the contrary. The rate of expansion is actually increasing. In other words, very, very, very soon, it won't be even possible to detect the red light shift anymore. So a lot of nothingness is coming our way, and if that wasn't enough, the Andromeda Galaxy, which can be seen almost by the naked eye in the night sky now, is headed directly on collision course with our own. That's some design, isn't it? Of taking our own tiny little suburb of this magnificent cosmological
Yeah, who is that last stream who was talking about astronomy?
For an example of all the planets.
You mean Lights and Fire?
I don't know if it was him or if it was someone else, but that most of the astronomers were Christian and that they, they used the Bible to guide their work.
His name was Philip Christian, so I'm giving out a shout out to the Philip Christian debate that I did with him.
Because I mean, they knew so much. I mean, we didn't know until I think it was the 1930s that Andromeda was another galaxy. We used to just think everything was in the Milky Way. We had no idea that there were whole other galaxies out there.
Yeah, it wasn't until we could really see with a telescope.
Because you need a very powerful telescope to be able to make out that it's not just one light, that's actually a bunch of stars over there. Because it from the distance looks like just one big light, but if you look up close, it's not.
Yep.
It's in it. All of them but ours are either much, much, much too hot or much, much, much too cold to support any kind of life. And of our own planet, huge tracts of it, the same can be said, either too hot or too cold and on a knife edge. And we've only been on it for about 100,000 years minimum, 250,000 years maximum. And our tenancy on it can already be seen to be very short term. And in the meantime, we've discovered that of all the species ever put on this planet, or to have occurred on it, I mean to say, 98 to 99% have already become extinct. So if all of the things I've just mentioned to you, all of which are true and factually verifiable, are the responsibility of a deity, then there's only one conclusion you can draw. This deity must be very, very clumsy, very tinkering, very improvising, and very, very wasteful of cosmic and human and animal material, at least. He must be very, very capricious indeed, playing and toying with his creatures and his creations, and or he must be very cruel and very indifferent. So if you want to award these responsibilities to your God or to your religion, then I'm entitled, I think, to wish you joy of it. Thank you.
Okay, we begin now the 15-minute head-to-head session, and Mr. Hitchens will begin
Dun, dun, dun.
By questioning Mr. D'Souza.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around.
I believe we let him start first, so we're letting you start the head-to-head first.
I was about to say I'm not ready, but that's not quite true.
You want me to go first?
No, it's perfectly all right.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say that we, well matched as we are as chaps and as magnificent mammals, either products of evolution or of a creator, that our position on this stage isn't precisely equivalent? In other words, you couldn't really resent it if I said you've got a burden of proof that I don't really have. Because it's not just a matter, is it, of saying there might be a force, a life force, an originating force, which I can't obviously disprove. But you have to show that there's a force that actually cares about humans, intervenes in human affairs, cares which country wins a war, perhaps, even which party wins an election, who knows, but perhaps answers prayers, takes an interest. In other words, there's a big gap between deism, the idea of a god, and theism, the idea of a religion that can
Well,
propitiate.
we spend a lot of time talking about that.
Well, I would agree
Yeah.
in part as
They're deistic arguments.
wholly affirmative in any debate. What's so great about God?
They
I
always
need
go
to
back
show
to
what's
deism.
great about God. Now, it's true that our topic is huge, and if you want to go into issues of why there's suffering in the world, or why do we believe in the Christian God, why Jesus and not, say, Baal or Allah or Krishna, then we've got to go into each topic, but they are a little far afield perhaps for this debate, although I'm happy to jump into them. So I won't assume the burden of proving all those things. I'll assume the burden of proving the resolution of what's great about God, and then if you want to pick particular aspects of it, I think we'll have to engage on those specifically.
I mean to say, perhaps I'll try and rephrase it a little, that I see no reason to believe in the existence of any supernatural dimension, either cosmologically or on Earth or in human life. I can live without it, and in fact, I think everyone does live without it, whether they believe in it or not. You clearly don't think that, but you also think that salvation is attainable by this. It's not just a matter of proving that there might be a supernatural dimension, but that if you believe in it in the right way, your sins can be forgiven, you can be saved, and you can have an afterlife, a blissful one, that will go on forever. Now, don't you think that's quite a high burden of proof?
Yes, but I think that a lot of those things flow out of the premise of God. For example, there are a lot of things unbelievable in themselves that are completely believable if you posit God. For example, miracles
Magic makes everything possible, right?
I know a way to make
Exactly. And I'm going to add Josh.
Magic makes everything work.
It's magic. Did you want to say something, Josh? And if not, I'm going to keep on playing.
my hand grow twice as long. I would say that's preposterous.
Pause
On the
it
other
one
hand,
sec.
you told me that there.
What's that?
Oh, I just thought, because I was in another stream the other day, because they brought up magic, and I forget whose channel it was on. Maybe Maddox's channel, but Erica was in there, and they were talking about the flood, and she's pointing out the physical and impossibilities all wrapped up in that, and then their response is basically, "But magic," and then it's like, well, if you guys want to say it's magic, I can't argue with that. I can't, but if you want to say it was natural, we can deal on those terms. But science can't disprove magic.
Yeah, well, whenever I ask for an actual mechanism, that's generally what I get is magic. Well, how did it happen? Well, magic. And then they're like, but enough about God. Let's get back to the science that I disbelieve in, and you guys will have to explain for hours and hours on end. And then...
So, I mean, science is out testing things, building models, trying to figure out how things work, trying to understand the natural world. And then the Christian comes in and is too lazy to do any of that work and just says, it's all magic. Who cares?
It's magic. It's a great answer.
There is an all-powerful, omnipotent, supernatural being ruling the universe, and if I pray to him,
See?
he has the power to make my hand grow long. That becomes less unbelievable, doesn't it?
Not to me, no.
No, because, well, but once you concede the premise, if you thought there was a supernatural being, you don't think he could do it.
No, both claims are equally absurd.
No, but right. So then you're essentially giving me a false burden, because you're saying, Dinesh, not only do you have to prove the existence of God, you've got to prove these 10 other things, even though if I prove the first thing, all the other 9 would logically follow. You may not accept the first one, but you can't pretend like I need independent proofs of the other 9.
Well, no, I'm just simply saying I don't think theism does follow from deism. In other words, you get to the point which Spinoza arrived at and Einstein arrived at, and many other scientists and philosophers have arrived at by saying, well, there's enough harmony and majesty in all this for us not to be able to say or even want to say that there may not be a hand at work somewhere. But you can't get from that to a personal God whose mind you can know, whose will you can obey, whose help you can enjoin.
Well, I would agree.
All your work is still ahead of you, in other words.
I think that deism is a form of theism. It is theism light, you might say. I wouldn't put Spinoza on that category. He was more of a pantheist.
Yes, okay.
On the other hand, I think that deism does posit a supernatural creator, but somehow makes him an absentee creator. He started the clock and then he stepped back. So it's a little bit of an idea of a lazy God. It's not my idea of a God. But on the other hand, deism may be one way to start on
Yeah, because we don't see him doing anything today. So
Then, okay, fine.
He
Let me ask you.
magically disappeared or mysteriously
Given
disappeared.
the number of gods there have been,
he used to do stuff before we could verify it or record it, but now he doesn't do anything.
Thor, Artemis, anyone could come up with
Yep.
quite a long list. H.L. Mencken once got the list up to something like 10,000. The gods that we know have been worshipped. It seems to me that we have three possible alternatives. Let's not even say possible, thinkable alternatives. One, that all of these are false. In other words, that the proposition God made man in his own image is exactly the wrong way around. Instead, men made many gods in their own image. So either they're all false or they're all true, which, as I say, is only just thinkable because it's obviously nonsensical, or only one of them is true. And actually, if you chose that to be Christianity, you'd have to say, if you're a real Christian, it seems to me, only one version of that Christianity is true, because many of those are mutually incompatible. Now, do you really think, given the odds and given the scope and the scale of it, that the third answer can be the correct one?
Not only do I think it can be, I think that you can give reasonable grounds why it is. See, I think the strength of this argument or the lack of strength of it can easily be seen by purposes of an analogy. If I were to say, if we look at the ancient world, you have a number of philosophers, Thales, who thinks everything is made of water, and Heraclitus, and Parmenides, and Democritus, who thinks you have atoms. And just because we've got all these competing rival theories, it's probable that none of them are right, and there really isn't a theory that is right. Well, it turns out that Democritus was the closest. His atomic theory, actually looking at it, making allowances for the difference of time and era, it's not that because you've got many theories, one is bound to be wrong. In fact, you could say that because all these religions represent human efforts to reach the supernatural, the fact that you've got so many efforts shows that it's quite likely that some efforts are closer than others. It's sort of like a way of saying, we're all trying to get up to the light up there. There are going to be different attempts, different theories for how to do it, but some of them may approximate better than others.
Yeah, they all have the same amount of evidence.
But surely that's not really
Zero.
Yeah, like how bad is that?
observable natural phenomena. He's saying,
Pretty bad.
I mean, yeah, Christianity has no more evidence than Hinduism.
that nature is here. Is it all water? Is it all air? Is it phlogiston? Is it atoms? That's completely different from saying, whose God are you going to worship? And by the way, scientists do not kill each other for getting...
Yeah, I'm trying just not to say fuck Dinesh D'Souza.
It's okay. Let that emotion flow. Sure as hell ain't gonna get any evidence from him.
He's channeling the raging atheist.
Religion is something else than an opinion. I hope you'll agree.
It is, but let's
a faith.
Let's look at that.
It's a faith with a big promise attached to it.
I wouldn't say that exactly. Here's why. Let's say that you've got a human level over here, which is to say the level of terrestrial man. Let's say that we have a divine level, which is perfection, perfect beauty, perfect goodness, perfect truth over here. I would say that the Eastern religions are trying to cross this huge chasm by diagnosing a problem. And the problem is essentially the word that we begin our sentences with, I. So if you can get rid of the self, the idea is, then you can achieve nirvana, liberation. Now that is not faith, that is actually a specific moral remedy for a specific human problem. Judaism and Islam have a different remedy. Here's the human level, here's the divine level. Here are a set of codes and commandments and diets and regulations. Pray 5 times a day, look in the direction of Mecca, observe Ramadan, and this ladder will take you human step by step to God. Christianity says, no, this is a noble effort, but it's not going to work because the gap is too large. If it's going to be closed, God has to close it. This guy up here has got to come down to the human level. That's the only way to bridge the chasm.
This is the Lord of the Rings. If you ask
I have-
Gandalf really nicely, he'll do anything you want.
Agree that I've given a reasonable approximation of the human problem.
You know, I heard the nicest thing from Stephen Colbert yesterday, which was that his favorite character in fiction was Samuel Gamwise. And I feel like there's just so much more wisdom in the Lord of the Rings than you could find in the Bible.
You can
Absolutely.
This is the
The
Eastern.
biggest problem
This is the
is
Islamic
that
Jewish solution.
anybody older than us will just like argue that
Well, scuff. So that's basically what probably get a lot of cringing. But I mean, you know, it's funny how they will find metaphorical truth in something 2,000 years old. But yes, they will often scoff if we say, you know, well, I find metaphorical truth in like Isaac Asimov. And they'll be like, well, it's not the same thing. And it's like, well, I think I'll take mine because I'm not saying that it's real. I'm just taking the metaphorical truth, and I don't have to kill someone for it to be real.
You remember back when they they don't talk about it much anymore, but that Bible code nonsense.
I do remember a little bit of that. Yeah, it reminds me similarly to prophecy. You know, they're trying to build their own puzzle pieces.
And then they used the same rationale, and they went through Moby Dick, and they found all kinds, using the code, and they found all sorts of bizarre messages.
Yeah, because you can do that with anything.
I mean, if you do it long enough, eventually you're going to have some words come out, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like the typewriter thing that they like to bring up, but eventually you're going to string words together. You go long enough, you'll string a sentence.
This is the Christian solution. Which one seems to make the most sense?
Well, you
Not the Christian.
Self-denying ordinance and say you weren't going to postulate revelation. But if
I
you're
didn't
going
reveal
to
the revelation.
no, but your model just now would necessitate that. It would say, no, you're not building up to God. God is coming down to you. That must mean a revelation in the sense of an intervention.
No, but Christopher, my point is, I'm not appealing to revelation as a source of authority. What I was trying to say here is there are three competing explanations, and one of them is going to make human, intellectual, and experiential sense.
But
So I wasn't appealing to revelation in that sense.
But you would agree, wouldn't you? I think you'd have to agree that anyone's entitled to say that all three of those would be false.
Well, of course you could, but you could reject the premise that there is a way to cross the chasm, and that would be the atheist position. So that would be a way of saying, no, we've got a livid level down here. There's just no way. This is simply a hocus-pocus level. This pure perfection and beauty is a myth. This is the way we are, where Darwinian primates get used to it. That would
Come on, we're just looking for a little bit of evidence.
So, tell me
I
when
can almost see why people hold it when I hear you talk. Listen, because we are doing God, not just Christianity, and I guess I've probably only got one or two questions left, and it's a matter of the majesty and grandeur of religion and God in general that we're talking about. Let me ask you this: if I was being born today in Saudi Arabia, would you rather that I became an atheist baby or a Wahhabi Muslim baby?
This is a trick question because, look, if you told me that you are going to be a baby destined to be a sort of miniature Bin Laden, then I would rather take Christopher Hitchens over Bin Laden.
Oh, thanks a
It
lot.
wouldn't be a close call.
There we go.
God, that was like pulling teeth.
No, I was just hesitating because I don't want to write off the entire Muslim world as potential.
See, we're not like Bin Laden. We're at least a little bit better than Bin Laden. So, and if we wonder why we have negative stereotypes in this country about atheists.
Pretty much, yeah. I think a lot of them would like a Christian version of Saudi Arabia.
Oh yeah, Christian Sharia law.
Stage. Hey, here's a Muslim baby, but it's worth less because it's going to, I think that's too harsh. I mean, there's a species of Islam I think we rightly fear, and I think we're on the same side of the aisle on that one. But I just don't want to paint too broad a brush with the Muslim world. Is it my time?
Yeah.
What I mean is, when your turn's over, then I'll ask you questions.
Yes, sure.
It is, okay.
Yes, I believe it is yours, yeah.
Let me begin by clarifying a couple of things. You earlier referred to Charles Manson, and you said, I don't want us to treat Manson the way I want to be treated. But I think that the moral principle involved here is the following. It's not, should we treat Manson like Hitchens, but rather, we should treat Manson the way we would want ourselves to be treated if we did what he did. In other words, the moral principle here is, when it says treat others as you would wish to be treated, it's not Manson's a murderer and I'm not, obviously treat us differently, we know that. The moral principle is, obviously, put ourselves behind a veil of ignorance, in John Rawls' terms, and say, we don't know who did it. Let's say I was the guy who did it. What punishment would it be just to impose on me? Life in prison, the death penalty? Well, okay, it's not me, it's Manson. Give him that. So that's a way, ultimately, of applying, you might say, a neutral rule. So do you agree that the Manson analogy was flawed in that sense?
Then it would be, Dinesh, it'll be a different rule. The rule is, do not do to another what you would not want done to yourself. I'm saying, in that, I quite agree, by the way, with your Rawlsian take, but that's evolved without any reference to any injunction about a golden rule.
You spoke about compulsory love.
Yes.
But isn't the lesson of the book of Genesis, and isn't the core principle of Christianity that God offers his love to us? Christ died for our sins, but there's nothing compulsory about it. It's completely a free choice. You have a free
but there's kind of that thing if you say
chose
no.
to reject it, but nobody made you.
Except for that whole burn you forever thing. But
I mean, it's totally up
that,
to you. Totally up to you. No pressure. No, do whatever you want to do.
Listen, I'm gonna put this gun to your head, but whether you want to put the wallet in my hand, I'm actually gonna leave that up to you.
Do what you think is right.
You can, of course, you're free
Yeah.
to reject it. I'm here
Become
to
divinely
illustrate
inspired
that point
for an
to the
answer.
best of my ability. But in a very large number of times and places, the price of rejecting it, or even of seeming to reject it, has been very high. And not just in the sense of eternal punishment after death, but extreme punishment and persecution during the only life one actually has. So I'm thankful, very grateful to you, naturally, for giving me my manumission. But I don't actually think I need your permission to be free on this point, or the permission from the divine either. That's being unfree. It's like saying, of course if people ask me, have we got free will? I say yes. Of course we have. We have no choice. At least I know I'm being ironic, and the irony is somewhat at my expense. But if you say, of course we have free will because the boss says we do, you've advanced the argument not at all. It's analogous to that.
Okay, that's the end of our head-to-head session. Thank you both, gentlemen.
What? I thought he had 15.
15 minutes.
Oh, but you know what? I think we misfired a little bit in that we were initially intending to go back and forth, but we carved the time, and he took the bulk of it. Let me have a couple more questions, and then we're happy to move
I
it.
think he should, don't you? Yeah.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Hitchens?
Yes, I think I unintentionally overrun my time this time. Sorry.
You mentioned the issue about design, and you said that you've become kind of immune to arguments from design. So how do you think we got
Yeah, they're all bad arguments. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, the term Big Bang was originally used, like the term Tory and suffragette, as a term of abuse, as a term of mockery, by Professor Fred Hoyle, who is at different times, he's a great physicist in Cambridge, who at different times has been a believer and an unbeliever. But he thought the idea that things had begun in this way was so ludicrous that he said, oh, I suppose you think it all began with some big bang. I think it was on a BBC discussion program.
I mean, they call it intelligent design. Moronic design would be more accurate.
I'm quoting him now. It looks like some super.
And that name is such a PR'd shop term. You know, they went. Creationism sounds too. It has ism in it, and it has it sounds too religious. So, it's not religion. It's intelligent design.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great marketing campaign. I'd give whoever created that word a raise.
Oh, they probably got fleeced a bunch of money from their parishioners already.
He's been both a believer and an unbeliever. I'm not a physicist at all. I'm a member of no school.
And then we'll pay Ken Hovind to go around and lie to kids.
Yeah. Go around, do that stuff, shop lots of books and DVDs, and then the people that make all the crap with the Dinosaur Adventureland and Noah's Ark, and there's so much money to be made in the good book. It's amazing.
Hi, kids. Remember all that stuff they taught you in the biology class? It's all bullshit. Those biologists, they don't know shit. They're dumb.
Yeah, we knew way more 2,000 years ago.
Who seems to need any supernatural help in explaining, let's say better understanding, because we're only grazing on the very, very lower slopes and the outer limits of knowledge at the moment, that it's at all time to be able to postulate that there's a supernatural intervention involved, any more than one is required for the origin of species. Though I can't disprove that there was a divine hand involved in that too. It's just that everything operates just as well, every analysis, every explanation, without such an assumption.
Let me ask you finally about morality. You gave the example of human beings being 95% or 99% chimpanzee in terms of the similarity of genes. And yet, in the chimpanzee world, things work a little differently than the human world. You turn on the Nature Channel, you'll see that one gorilla, one ape will go into the lair of another, stupefy the rival with blows, grab the female chimp, drag her screaming and bloody to his own lair.
Humans would never do this.
And this is called the Nature Channel. Now, on the other hand, if you came to my house, stupefied me with blows, and did this to my wife, we'd all take a little different view of the matter.
Hey.
If we are merely...
So what happened was God was really busy, so he just decided to copy and paste 90-some% of chimpanzee DNA to humans and just changed a few things here and there. But
yeah, and if it wasn't for the Bible, if it wasn't for just a little bit of tweaking, we would just be constantly going into each other's house, raping and pillaging. And I just love the constant shitting on other animals. I knew it was coming. It was oh my God, these fucking chimpanzees, which are amazing fucking other animals. And but can you imagine? Have you ever seen a human drag someone away and then do horrible things to them? Never. Have you ever heard, James? Have you ever heard? I'm tired of these fiction stories that these atheists create about people getting dragged away.
It's just lies because they hate God.
They hate God. They think that we are monkeys.
They want to be able to cheat on their spouse without feeling guilty about it, so they just pretend God's not real.
Exactly.
Moral or ontological leap come from that makes two creatures almost identical genetically be assessed so differently in any moral compass that either you or I would use?
Well, I wasn't saying that we were equivalent, though. In the with half chromosome away, actually, is what it is with the chimpanzee. I wasn't saying that postulated an equivalence, though. Again, the example you've given isn't quite the one that I would have chosen. Somewhere in the world right now, that's happening to a human woman. Actually, quite a large number of human women.
There you go, Hitch.
Right, but
Yep, there we go.
for the minimum 100,000, maximum 250,000 years we've been on the planet, it's happened a great deal. And whereas the chimpanzee doesn't have a torture chamber, doesn't practice genocide, doesn't make war, doesn't have the refinements of cruelty that the senior partner does. Our difference is that we are the only primates who know how to laugh. We're the only ones who definitely know we're going to die. Only ones who make gods, and we're the only ones.
What happened?
And the browser crashed.
Oh, okay.
Fun.
who think we can cheat death, or
And
that an exception will
Joshua,
be made
if you want to join, it
in our own
says
case.
connect
But it seems
device.
to me that gives us more in common with primates rather than less.
But what's in common is the behavior. The point I wanted to highlight is what's different is that in every human community, this kind of behavior would be seen as abominable. In other words, it's the moral evaluation that makes the difference. Obviously, you can find, that's why we use the term bestial conduct. You will find bestial conduct among human beings, but the difference is we assess it differently. You never get the idea that in the chimpanzee world, there's a small United Nations issuing declarations of chimpanzee rights. In fact, one of the interesting things about the debate about animal rights is that animals never seem to respect them. So the point I want to make is there is this huge ocean between the is and the ought, and it appears to be crossed only by our species. Now, doesn't that demand some kind of recognition instead of simply saying we're also capable of more evil, we're more capable of more good, and we're more capable of more evil, and we're more capable of the moral standards to know the difference. That's what makes us human.
That's fine, except that I don't think I can fully share the premise. I mean, as a matter of fact, in the great state of Mississippi, not very long ago, the rape and torture and bloodying and cudgeling of a woman would have had the sanction of law, and indeed of religion too.
But
so
only...
it's just not true to say that this difference is any criticism of my pointing out that these are our close cousins.
I'll close on this point, but it seems that your exception proves my point. The only way that human beings can do that is by excommunicating the person you do it to from the human species. So in some senses, you've got to make the other person less than human or non-human to justify doing it to them. And far from being an undermining of morality, that's a confirmation of it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yes.
Now we come to the part of the debate where you get to ask questions. If you got questions for either of our participants, please make your way to one of the microphones at the end of the aisles. Please ask brief questions, direct them either to Mr. Hitchens or Mr. D'Souza. When the person that you're requesting to answer your question does so, the other debater will have an opportunity to respond. And we'll begin on my left, sir.
This is a question for Dinesh. You mentioned the universal constants of physics about the improbability for our universe sustaining life. However, I want to know your response to this. Einstein said God does not play dice, which is you're saying you're postulating an improbable universe with no denominator. In other words, it might not have been any other way. There may be no other possibilities for universes. So what's your response to that?
I'll restate the question. The question is, hey, you've been talking about all these great coincidences, the so-called fine-tuning of the universe, but didn't the great authority Einstein say God does not play dice with the universe? And isn't Einstein's a dictum a refutation of this notion of particularity and fine-tuning? Einstein's comment about God not playing dice with the universe was made in the context of the discovery of quantum physics. Einstein refused to believe that nature could be so erratic and unpredictable at the very tiny scale. And then as his life went on, Einstein had to admit that quantum physics was a premise that was not only as validated as the theory of relativity, but in some ways one of the most tested theories in all of physics. So Einstein was wrong. Einstein had to admit that his anxiety about quantum physics was misplaced, and his refusal to believe it one of the great mistakes of his life.
Yeah, if
So
only
Einstein,
Christians would admit when they're wrong
anthropic
and be willing to
principle of
change
the final
their
thing.
their
But in
views.
one context where he used the phrase "God does not play dice with the universe," it turns out God does.
Or even better, try to prove us wrong. Like, Einstein went and tried to prove quantum mechanics wrong. And in doing so, he ended up validating quantum mechanics. But we never get any sort of evidence or input or model from the theists.
Mr. Hitchens, you care to respond?
Einstein was he tried to avoid using the word God at all. He would sometimes use a sort of playful expression, the old one, and so forth. He tried not to personalize the question because he was so sure that you couldn't get from any speculation to a personal or intervening God. And though he was very often misrepresented on this point, if you're good enough to buy a copy of my Portable Atheist anthology available at fine bookstores everywhere, you can see a very exhaustive anthology of Einstein's on this question, which were determinedly non-theistic.
Okay.
Thanks for coming out, y'all. This is also for Mr. D'Souza. I hate to overload him, but when you were making your rebuttal, you appealed to the uniqueness of Earth as evidence for God's existence. And I'm kind of confused. I don't see how a supernatural explanation that doesn't rely on scientific fact for its proof is any more likely or easier or anything than just chance.
Okay. The question is, why posit a creator? Why not say chance? Let me give you an analogy to illustrate my point. Let's say I entered the California state lottery and I win. I would say, that's chance. It's unlikely. There are a lot of people in California, but someone had to win, so I won. Now let's say that the next week I entered the Nevada state lottery, the Utah lottery, and the lottery in every 50 state, all the 50 states, and I win every single one. Then someone would say, well, that could be chance, but when you start multiplying the odds, human reason begins to rebel. So the point is, ultimately, chance is the preferred explanation when you are dealing with events that make sense by chance. I toss a coin and I get heads. If I toss it 100 times, I should get close to 50 heads and 50 tails. Let's say I get 99
He's
heads.
putting the cart before the horse, though.
You will immediately write off chance and presume design. So that's my point. Human reason operates
He's
like
assuming everything was designed, not that everything contoured its
too big
around what we would need.
So how come
Goes back to the puddle.
99.9% of all species on Earth have been
Same
rendered
thing.
extinct? What design is that? Or would you prefer, since that's such depressing news, to attribute it to coincidence?
I'm not. First of
Random,
all, I don't think
these species were unlucky.
First of all, there are only a tiny percentage of species through time that have developed nervous systems and, at least by our understanding, experience, you might say, pain in the sense that we understand it. We're not sure a cockroach experiences pain. We're not sure that an amoeba
on
does.
other animals
So it's
again.
true that a lot of species have been wiped out through geological time, but to pretend like this is some kind of a divine genocide, I think is to misunderstand the laws of biology.
No, I wouldn't say it was a divine genocide unless you thought it was a plan. Nothing remains to be explained if you think these events happen randomly.
My point is, you're saying you think that the idea that you've got a lot of different species, one developing out of the other, you think that that refutes the idea of design, whereas to me it confirms it. If you have a few simple laws that are, you might say, not only, Richard Dawkins in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, says, isn't it amazing we have a watch? And then he says, nature is the blind watchmaker. And he goes on in the book to describe what could be called a watch factory called evolution. that magically produces copies of itself, watches, and other things, which survive according to nature's laws. And so he finds a watchmaker factory, and he goes, this doesn't require explanation. This is due to chance. Wait a minute. If you have to explain a watch, you also have to explain the watchmaker factory. It's a rather ingenious device. Now, if you can say, Dawkins himself says that the original cell has more complexity than the Encyclopedia Britannica. And not even Darwin dared to suggest that the original cell...
But you don't have to explain the watchmaker. You get to just assume
presumes
him.
the existence of self-replicating cells
Yeah.
and then tells how we can get from A to B and B to C, but it takes A for granted. So it seems to me rather
It
unbelievable.
also ignores that everything would be a watch.
I don't know. Yeah. Have you ever heard him posit any explanation as to where God came from? Or seems like they don't have a clue.
Oh, we'd be going back to magic. But this is, the sand would be watches, the water would be a watch, and the watch would be a watch. So why is the watch special if the sand is created and the water is created? Why is the watch even special if everything's created? At that point, you can't contrast anything. It's a silly definition. It's an equivocation.
Unbelievable to pretend like we have somehow answered the argument for design when we are presuming extremely complex design at the beginning.
Wouldn't God be extremely complex?
Well, that was really.
But he's not
Yes.
designed.
That's
they can't tell us
another
where
thing.
he came from.
Another annoying thing is that it would basically be something complex and then apparently nothing but like raw elements, a few raw elements, and then the planets for the first generation planets and stars, and then life, and then multicellular life with consciousness and all this stuff. But it's like consciousness is new, and it's like, why would there be this floating? Why would there be this floating nebulous consciousness before the universe, before multicellular life? It's putting the cart before the horse, just like you were saying before.
Yeah, ask 1,000 Christians where God came from. Let me know if you get any coherent answer.
you get crickets.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and giving us this enlightening discussion. My head, like many of us in the audience, is just awash with these interesting ideas. Nietzsche said famously that God was dead, and of course Freud, in a later sociological work called The Future of an Illusion, said that like all illusions, religious belief would eventually disappear. As you've pointed out, Western Europe is an example. The question is to Mr. Hitchens, you said that religion is a kind of vestigial holdover from our intellectual infancy. Do you think that we will all eventually outgrow it? And why is the relinquishing of religion seem to be so slow and uneven, particularly in the States?
A small correction. It's true Nietzsche said God was dead, and it's said by some that Freud said that God was dad. But it is not true that Freud said in The Future of an Illusion that it would wither away. Quite to the contrary, he said it was an illusion with a future. Because, he said precisely, of its rootedness in wishful thinking. For as long as partially evolved primates, that we will get over our fear of death, or our need for worship, and our willingness to believe in gods. All I can ask people to do is one by one, for themselves, to emancipate themselves from this primitive belief, and for societies one by one, as many have, to put at least the theocratic phase behind them and build up a wall of separation between religion and politics. And that's what I'm here to do.
If I can offer a brief thought, there is a very strong evolutionary argument against Freud. In fact, evolution is decimating a lot of what Freud had to say, but I want to deal specifically with the idea of wish fulfillment. The thing to realize is that for surviving organisms, it is extremely expensive to hold illusory beliefs. And evolution counts against them. For example, imagine the case of two rabbits. Let's call them the survivor rabbit and the eternal life rabbit. Okay, and both are being pursued, let's say, by a wolf. The survivor rabbit says, I've got only one life to live, run like hell. The eternal life rabbit goes, yeah, probably I should try to escape, but I've got another life waiting for me that's even better than this one. In other words, the eternal life rabbit has the illusion. Which rabbit is more likely to get eaten? The point being here that evolution
that is an analogy I've never heard before.
They built
Was that for or against
that is,
religion? I'm a little confused right
interesting.
now. Because
So, I mean, religion, I guess, has huge evolutionary advantage. That way, you know, if you're stranded on a desert island and you're an atheist, you're screwed. But if you're religious, you just pray for food to come out of nowhere, and God will just poof, and there you have enough supplies to sustain yourself. Why didn't I think of that?
And did you know that if you just slice open a chicken's neck, it could start to rain? It all starts to make sense once you have faith.
The rain dance, yeah.
Yeah, just.
But you have to spray the blood on. Yeah.
But
or,
excuse me,
paint the blood on your doorpost.
I'm sorry.
Paint the blood
We're
on the
making fun of
doorpost.
religion because it's brutal and barbaric to kill an animal for a sacrifice. We are not savages. We kill humans for a sacrifice.
Or someone in chat asking why we're making fun of religion.
No, I'm just going on my good old tangent. But
it's fun.
Pyramids and put the best calf and the best food away for the gods. This is non-Darwinian behavior. Those kinds of people should be expected to be wiped out from the gene pool, but they aren't. In fact, religion has a better survival value than atheism. That's why there are a lot more Christians in the country than atheists.
Also, I want to fix something that he said at the beginning. I don't know any statistic that says that Christianity is growing worldwide as the number one. I'm fairly sure that Islam was the.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Islam is the fastest worldwide, and the nuns are the fastest in Western society and secularish countries.
And I mean, there is also a difference between people who claim, are labeled Christians, who identify as Christians, but practicing Christians, that's another deal altogether.
Yeah, well, cultural Christians, but America seems to be the outlier as far in Western society as far as the people who actually believe it.
It isn't just that illusions.
Yeah, I mean the church is basically dissolved in Europe.
Make no Darwinian sense when they are this costly, and Freud needs to come up with a better explanation.
It's ingenious, but it doesn't allow for the retarding effect upon human civilization of superstition, slavery, genocide, human sacrifice, religious warfare, resistance to scientific and medical advance, and so forth, all of which can be chalked up with a great deal more accuracy, I might add, to the religious worldview.
Okay.
And which now that we're about to reach the point where apocalyptic weaponry is within the grasp of messianic parties and states, they may find that it's extremely counter-survival in a very alarming and immediate sense.
Next question. My question is for Mr. D'Souza, and I'd prefer if you didn't go into a deep philosophical explanation, but just answered
I'll try to give you a shallow one.
The simple example. I would like you to answer without going too deep.
In other words, no word salad bullshit.
Why doesn't God do what?
Heal amputees. Why do people survive cancer but not regrow?
Oh, good question.
Why doesn't God heal amputees? I think this is a question that you might say presumes unbelievable. Christopher protested against it earlier, but it's unbelievable human arrogance. The human arrogance is this, that God is a kind of cosmic bellhop whose job it is ultimately to remedy all our sufferings. Maybe God created a universe which has many goods. Maybe God created a multiplicity of creatures which are, in some senses, good in themselves.
Wait a minute. I mean, they're not against the idea of praying, but they're saying
Yeah.
it doesn't matter because God doesn't care what you want. He's just going to do what he wants to do. So if he doesn't want to heal
Yeah.
amputees, he's not going to heal them. But then
And yeah,
why do they want us to pray to him?
he's using two arguments here.
Because the
He
only prayers
started off. What was that? Well, he started off
No, go
with
ahead.
the how dare you argument, the how dare you demand things of a god, and slightly moved into, or we could just move into the, well, we kind of, well, or not we, but theists demand things of him all the time. In fact, George Carlin, it's a great bit. You know, people are always praying. What about God's plan? He has a plan. Worked really hard. And now you come along. Want to fuck things up. So it's almost like...
yeah.
I
was just going to say, if a kid gets cancer, if a Christian gets cancer and then they pray to God to heal him, and then they go and get chemotherapy and they don't die, they're going to thank God for that.
Yeah. And like Dornell said, why not heal amputees? Puny freaking God. Come back to this, just like a God who can't lie. Even though it's not a good quality, it's still just lots of weird things. He can come back from the dead. He can part the Red Sea. If you're Muslim, he can make a crack in the middle of the moon, and he can't make an amputee's arm grow back. I mean,
I guess it's plausible deniability, because there's no natural process for that for God to work in. So if he did it, it would obviously be a miracle, and that would be confirming his existence. So, he can't do that. But if, someone has cancer, he can intervene then, and maybe he'll heal them, but it'll just look like it was the chemotherapy that kept them alive, not him.
Yeah.
So he always has to stay very well hidden.
That's the funny thing, is that get cancer, pray while we're in the hospital, while the doctors work away, while the chemo goes through the body, while my body fights for dear life, and then overcome it. Doctors help recovery, get home, thank God he saved me. It's like, well, it was probably Dr. Stevens, but sure,
that probably
if
was
you
more
wanna...
effective, because we see what happens when the people forego medical treatment and just pray. What happens to them? They die.
Yeah, I was gonna say they get
they don't
funeral
live too long.
plans. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Goods, but
And I
also,
mean, I guess if that's the choice you want to make, but then when parents make that choice for their kids, like refuse to give a medical treatment because they're against it and they just pray, and then the kids suffer because of it.
Or when they refuse vaccinations or blood transfusions or any sort of my religion dictates that the scientific method is evil in this one category, and it really doesn't matter if my kid infects your kid.
Yep.
Subject to the same natural laws that affect the universe, so that earthquakes, tsunamis, natural disasters, as human evil that's the product of free will, maybe God's plan is ultimately providential. It concerns salvation, your soul, the next life. So even if God were to grow back your limb, you're still going to die. And what good is that going to do if you've got a long limb, but ultimately you die separated from God? So you may say that God has perhaps a little bit of better priorities than we do.
Next question.
Staying hidden is his number one priority.
Hide and seek World champion. I would say, yeah, I guess in their view, 6,000 to 10,000 years and going.
Yahweh wins again.
That
Yeah.
Christianity, the hypothesis of Christianity is void because we change our story, so to say. Isn't that one of the main corollaries of the scientific method, that you change your theories with new data and adapt it so that it fits the evidence and not the other way around?
Well, yeah, but science doesn't claim to be, divinely
Yes,
given knowledge. It's just the workings of man.
be always in doubt and to be always willing to test your own assumptions against new evidence. But that's completely different from the affirmation of faith. The affirmation of faith is a presupposition. It used to be, I used to sit and listen to it being said, in order to believe, you must have faith in order to believe. There was nothing you could tell me in advance that if I could show it to you, would destroy your faith. It's evidence proof in that. You couldn't have a bigger discrepancy between two ways of looking at the world than the religious and the scientific one.
Let me support your point a little different way, though. I think what she's trying to say, and I would agree with her completely.
With evidence?
We always talk about scientific progress. We judge science by its latest and most spectacular.
That's a touchy subject with them. They're not really a big fan of that word. It triggers them.
Interpretations. And so we don't
So
concede
it
religion the
seems.
chance to progress like science. I mean, I could attack science by saying, let's look at those early scientists who, when people got sick, would cut them open and start bleeding them to death. Let's look at the ridiculous theories of people
Those
like
theists?
Who lived in the 5th or 6th century.
And wait, they had the head start. How long do they need to produce something useful?
Oh, like the theist who thought that was good medicine to put leeches on people? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just gotta drain that blood.
Before Christ, and that would be an indictment against science. You'd say, no, let's judge science by its best guy. Let's put up Einstein. But when it comes to religion, you don't concede the same progress, and it's quite possible that a religious principle, let's say the story of the Good Samaritan, the principle of help your neighbor, which is interpreted rather narrowly in ancient Israel, it means that the Samaritan helps somebody outside his own tribe. But then through the centuries and through Christianity, this principle is universalized. So tomorrow, if there's a famine in Rwanda, that becomes my neighbor. Very different than what the Jews would have said in the time of the Old Testament, but it's the taking of the religious principle and, in a sense, progressively developing it through time. Scientific progress, religious progress.
No, but the people, I'm sorry, I know I'm trespassing on the audience's time, but the scientific method is precisely to say, let's look at Thales and let's look at alchemy and rubbish medicine, these are things, and gradually overcome them and transcend them and find further and better innovations. It's not to say they weren't trying to be scientific, they were. Your analogy just doesn't hold. Now, you'll remember his name, I've forgotten it for the second, but the physicist who first came up with the idea of the Big Bang was a Catholic, practicing Catholic at the University of Louvain in Belgium.
Bernard Lemaitre.
That's it. And he took his findings to the Pope of the time, Pope Leo, I think, who said, I think, Your Holiness, you should know about this. And Pope Leo took it in as well as he could. He said, it's very impressive stuff. He said, if you like, I'll make it an article of faith. I'll say that all Catholics have to believe this. Now do you see the difference between the scientific and the religious method? I think that's the best illustration that I know. Professor Lemaitre said, actually, no, Your Holiness, I don't think that would be quite the way to spread the word. But there you go.
Okay, next question. Thank you both for being here. My question is for Mr. D'Souza. If you wanted to logically demonstrate the existence of God to an 11 or 12-year-old, how would you do that?
Evidence?
The question is, how would you make the case to a 12-year-old that God exists?
Yes.
And this is a very pertinent question, since I have in my house
hide Bible tracts in their porn.
Dude.
And so we all have to make this case to our children, particularly now that we live in secular culture. You can't just assume it.
Wow, I think my audio loop's going to break.
I think that one of the best ways to show a child is to point to morality.
Okay.
Because children have a very clear...
While you're beating your
and you may say undistorted...
child with a rod.
See, when we're adults, we develop
Can't
cunning
you stone them
rationalizations
to death?
because we want to do
Have to
something
check
that
that
runs
out.
against morality.
I guess that's after if the beating doesn't work,
In
then
other
you
words,
execute him.
becoming extremely and ingeniously Clintonian in a way that Christopher
Escalates a
Hitchens
little
would
bit
fully
quickly.
understand. We try a moral inversion in which the right becomes wrong, the wrong becomes. Children don't do that. There's in the child, you may say, this sort of the innocence of the child is, in a sense, the clear recognition of the difference. And so, in that sense, children hear within themselves the voice. Children are actually natural theists. You don't have to give them a proof because, in some senses, they understand, they recognize this voice within them that's not them. See, their voice is to go for the cookie jar.
I think the sound got
But
better.
there's this other voice, not
I mean,
them,
children
Sound
believe
guy
in
got an
the
upgrade.
Easter Bunny,
source
Tooth
of that voice.
Fairy,
You can't
Tooth
say
Fairy. Yeah.
that voice requires some acknowledgement and some explanation. And I'm saying the transcendent hypothesis is a better explanation than any rival one. It certainly isn't morality that we've made up. We might make up whether we want to live according to it. But to say we make up the morality itself, give me a break.
It's a good statement of the case by Dinesh that our morality is innate to us, though, and not given.
Okay, next question.
I'd first like to thank both of you guys for coming here.
It's a pleasure.
And my question is for Mr. Hitchens. Is there a difference between the greatest conceivable being or the laws of nature and a God, one that is not sentient? And if there is none, do you support the ontological argument? I assume you're familiar with that.
I got the ontological last bit. Could you speak up a little?
I'm sorry. Is there any difference between the greatest conceivable being in the ontological argument and a God that is not sentient, one that Mr. D'Souza would argue for? And if there is none, would you not support the ontological argument, which could
He
many
doesn't argue a non-sentient God. I don't think that came out right.
The ontological argument, tempting though it can be, is that it assumes we could conceive. Well, one of the shortcomings is assuming that we were able to conceive something than which nothing greater can be conceived. It would be difficult for us, I think, to be able to stretch our minds to that limit of conception and not award sentience, because that seems to me, though again, you're always hovering on the verge of tautology here, greatness to us is in some way indissoluble from consciousness or sentience. This would still leave us with the problem of where the being was that had created this greatest conceivable being. It still leads you to an infinite regression. If it was any good,
Exactly.
it would
Where did God come from? That's what he's trying to say.
But James, he's special.
In the interest of time, we'll move in. I have a lot to say on this argument, and I do in my book, but I'm going to let it go.
You couldn't comprehend it anyway, so there's no point.
Did we ever get an argument? Oh, I guess he said morality. I was going to say, did we ever get an answer? Or was it like just a minute of him saying, that's a good question?
It was mostly that. Yeah. They don't really have very good answers, so they just fill up the time by restating the question.
I feel like I just bought a car. Like, you ask
On The Price is Right?
Well, like, how much is it? And the guy's like, well, the number, how much is the number? Really? How much are numbers? Do we really need to talk about numbers? And numbers are great. I love numbers. Anyway, sign here. And you're like, oh, okay.
God is a good used car salesman.
After hearing you
indeed.
butcher evolutionary theory with your two bunny rabbit discussion, I wonder whether it'll fall on deaf ears. But could I ask your opinion of relatively recent cognitive discoveries of how religion is hijacking normal human behavior, normal cognitive processes like love and fear and the credulity of children, et cetera, et cetera? Do you look into that from a scientific perspective?
Who are your sources?
Pascal Boyer, Anderson Thompson, Heather Fisher.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Boyer's work, so let me address that. First of all, I want to begin by saying it's very easy to make an accusation. You've butchered evolutionary theory. Clearly, if I had butchered it so obviously, you'd be able to say how. But all you could do is make the allegation and then skate on as if the allegation sustains itself.
I'd like a
So
how
I'll
with a
stick
God.
with the rabbits and move on to Pascal Boyer. You have grossly misstated Pascal Boyer's work in saying that it somehow demonstrates. I don't think he would say it demonstrates anything. It's ultimately an effort to look at the evolutionary roots of religion. And what this body of scholarship does is it argues that religion is hardwired to some degree in the human brain. Now, by the way, I want to point to an aspect of this research that you should be aware of, because this is research that actually shows correlations and proves absolutely nothing. It's a little bit, in fact, the research, in a sense, was available 100 years ago. Everybody knows that if you give someone a heavy blow to their head, they lose consciousness. And so the argument is that the brain must cause consciousness, because without a brain, no consciousness. Similarly, if you find a guy who prays,
Right. All I want to know is I want to know how he's going to dig himself out of those statements, because so where do we get a guy? I know he's about to supposedly break this down, but I want to know where we get this whole consciousness without any physical medium at all. Because even in the future, synthetic consciousness, or if we find aliens, it's still going to be something. It's still going to be a physical medium. There's still going to be some brain.
Just guessing it's going to have something to do with magic, but let's see.
You can, through magnetic resonance imaging, look and see which parts of the brain light up, and you can jump to the conclusion, hey, that's the religious center in the brain that is causing the religious experience.
That's the retarded center.
There are non sequiturs buried in all
Just
this.
deactivate that part of the brain.
Bright light.
I have my own brain
lights
center?
up in my brain,
I'm just kidding.
It doesn't mean that my brain reaction is causing the light. There is an external experience that my brain is reacting to, and yet the assumption of people who find religious node centers in the brain is that these node centers are fabricating the religious experience. So I think what's going on here is far from science demonstrating atheism. Atheism is trying to hijack itself as a premise of science. It's ultimately presuming clearly there's no external experience. So if I can find the part of the brain that lights up...
Well, we have no evidence for any, so...
I have proven that religion is an illusion, and there's no external experience there whatsoever. Now, first of all, you know, the Declaration of Independence speaks
Yeah,
of...
how about all the people who've had, you know, brain tumors, and their personalities completely changed, you know? They started exhibiting completely bizarre new behaviors that they never done before. Then they do a MRI and they find out there's a tumor there, and then when they take the tumor out, the person goes back to normal.
Yeah, almost like the new person disappeared. But it to me, he just set up a whole bunch of premises to try and take himself somewhere, but he doesn't even know the true implication. He was trying to knock down intelligence, but
he's trying to imply that it's not only part of the brain, that it's somewhere else, but he's not really giving any evidence for that.
Yeah, and he basically gave all these naturalistic things, like the brain has to be physical, and then he just wanted to try and take it like to a bait and switch, to like, we're just trying to call them delusional, but it's not that we're trying to call you delusional. We're saying, look, when you take a hammer and you smash someone with the hammer, it seems like when their brain leaks out, it seems like they stop being conscious. So with that on board, where is the brain of this god that we can knock with a hammer?
Because if you're
not that we want to, but
if you're thinking about what's for lunch or whatever, and they can do a brain scan and see part of the brain that's activated, they know, oh, that's where you think about food. Or if you're listening to music, they can see where that activates in the brain. But also, it's also somewhere else outside the brain. It's not just the brain, but it is the brain, but it's somewhere else too, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's this whole soul concept and all this other stuff. They want it to go somewhere else, and they want it to be more than just the brain, more than just the mind, but they don't have evidence for that.
Planet from the beginning of time have had not only the belief in God, but in many cases the experience of God. They feel an experience of God in their lives. This is all empirical data. It's experience. Can this all be written off as illusion? Oh yeah, but I know 10 guys who claim to have
it
seen
can
UFOs.
be.
Yeah, but you show me 5 billion guys who have seen UFOs and I'll be searching for them myself. In other words...
What? First of all, I don't believe that we've been visited by UFOs, and I'd like to be searching for them myself. One has nothing to do with the other. In fact, he kind of keeps on giving up his hand. Like, I don't understand these points.
I mean, here's the thing. It's like a UFO. Well, that's a testable hypothesis. You can look up in the sky, and if someone says that it's up there, you can look and see if it's there. You can test that. You can't test God. You can't say, "Oh, let me look and see if there's a God." Oh, no. Oh, what do you mean? He's in an alternate dimension? Yeah. You can never get there anyway. Yeah. Sorry, you can never go there to see if he's not there. Just
Not
believe
only
he is.
that, but just take for a second, what he would want as evidence for aliens or something like that. What I would want for evidence for aliens would be something empirical. He'd say, "Show me the spaceship. Bring bring one down so I can meet one." Right? It's almost entirely analogous to a god. Well, bring one down. Let them communicate with us. Let them bring empirical testing. But as soon as the ball is in their court, the evidence just dissipates.
Well, I mean, most scientists, they're divided over whether we've had contact or not, but most scientists are fairly comfortable with the idea that there's alien life out there somewhere. Maybe some think it could never get to us, it's so far away, but most of them think it's probably out there somewhere. So seeing aliens, that's not something that science would be totally blindsided by. It's not like that would be totally bizarre, unheard of. It's kind of something that could happen scientifically, but we don't have any knowledge about universe creating, life creating genies that come from nowhere. We don't have any reason to think one of those exists.
And I'm skeptical that we have ever been visited, but it's obviously more plausible just for the sheer fact that we have an example of life.
Right.
We have at least a example of life.
We know it's possible for life to arise in the universe.
Possible. So right off the bat, we know that if there is one, there can be many. It'd be like looking at one star and assuming that there can be only one star. But it amazes me that they always have very high and rigorous standards for other religions, for other miracle claims, for any type of thing that goes against. Like, we will talk about the nuance of abiogenesis, and then we're going to go into the nursery rhyme of how we got into two of every animal onto a boat.
Dinesh D'Souza, I bet, just guessing, I could probably talk to him for like 5 hours, showing him evidence that suggests aliens exist or whatever, and he would just sit there and hand wave it all away. No, not good enough. Basically, the only thing he would accept is if one of their craft just launched or came down in broad daylight and they made a full-scale announcement or whatever.
Well, he would only accept empirical evidence.
The smoking gun, the smoking gun, perfect, complete, total, verifiable proof that you can't deny.
Well,
anything less than that, he wouldn't take.
Well, exactly. All of a sudden, he would become very skeptical. All of a sudden, his burden or his standards would be like, listen, I want it to be test tubed and proven, just like how I guarantee you he takes medicine. You know, when he wants a medicine that works, he has some sort of thing. He's going to get something that comes from a double-blind study that has been empirically proven. Because any other subject beyond this one, you know, they're going to follow science. It's just when when it contradicts their religion, it's easy to see which viewpoint wins.
I mean, he would. I'm sure he would. You could go over with him all the, and he would say, no, all those military pilots that claim to have interacted with UFOs, they're all either dumb or hallucinating. They don't know what they're talking about. The military radar operators that see these craft, they're also either dumb or they don't know what they're looking at, because it can't be,
That's okay. We can see 3 waterfalls and fall to our knees and follow Jesus, because 3 waterfalls equals the Trinity equals God.
Once you accumulate enough observational data, you've got to take the experience seriously. So I think the question, in a sense, reveals precisely the kind of arrogance that tends to write off religious experience, pretend that science has proven things that it has far from proven, and invoke authorities who would be embarrassed to be invoked in this context.
Can I just say very quickly, I think you ought to be suspicious of your own argument here, Dinesh. The quantity theory has huge dangers to it. For one thing, we don't know that many people who attended services made worshipping noises and so forth. They were doing so voluntarily. We've no means of establishing that. We do know what would have happened to them if they hadn't made these professions of faith, and we know what did happen to many who tried to ask even the most elementary questions about it. In societies like our own, which are not subject to direct religious coercion, the figure for people who have some kind of belief is much more like 85 than 99%. A good number of people, not all of them stupid, are born, if you like, without the ability to place themselves in a faith position. They just can't do it. I know, because I'm one of them. It may be a deformity, a cognitive one, for all I know. I don't think that it is. But if we're going to argue that nature makes a lot of people feel religious, which I certainly don't doubt, I think the majority of people have most of the time been at least somewhat religious, then you must concede also that there's a large minority of people for whom that is not so.
Okay. And I do.
Thank you. Next question.
My question is to Mr. Hitchens. We have a theist and an atheist before us, but could it not also be stated that we are all agnostic with leanings towards or against God?
Well, Thomas Huxley, who was Darwin's great champion, is a man I respect in many ways, and his famous debate with Bishop Wilberforce is an imperishable document at the Museum of Natural History in Oxford. But I often feel I can't thank him for inventing the word agnostic, which he did. I think the word, I hope this is interesting to you, it's a product really of Darwin's own wish that his theory not be harmful to Christianity. He hoped very much when he first evolved it, that the origin of species and the theory of natural selection was going to be compatible with faith. It took him a long time to decide that, at least in the form that faith then took, it wasn't going to be compatible. It took him a long time to go on and lose his own personal faith, which was actually for other reasons. But the word comes to us from this attempt at a compromise. I myself, perhaps temperamentally, am more in favor of making a pretty strict choice and not avoiding or temporizing these things. I think if you come to the conclusion that no serious or believable or credible evidence for the existence of a supreme being, let alone a benign, intervening, caring one, has been adduced, I think you're really obliged to say, not that you haven't made up your mind on it, but that you don't believe it, which would be my view.
Very briefly, I do think there are a lot of seekers, and they would fall in the agnostic category in the sense of, I don't know yet, I'm on the voyage, I want to search. I think the point that Pascal made that I was going to get it to earlier was, he said the problem with the agnostic position is at some point it runs out of gas. And that some point is the fact of death. Ultimately, at death, all abstentions are counted as no votes. So the agnostic who, in a sense, says, I'm not going to take a position, but I'm going to live as if God did not exist, is in some senses a de facto atheist. It's a de facto atheist who's not, in a sense, admitting it. And in this sense, I think I would agree with Christopher Hitchens. This is a rather alarming moment in the debate, a point of agreement. But the point, in some senses, agnosticism, if taken as an enduring philosophical position, it's a little bit of a dodge. On some issues, it's like voting. I won't vote, and I'll pretend like I have not favored either side. Not true. If you don't vote, your no vote does affect the outcome. In that, had you voted, it would have tilted the balance this way or that. So a no vote does count. It just counts in a different way.
Good. Okay. Next question. Well, first of all, thank you both for coming.
Oh, please.
You both very great. And Mr. Hitchens, I respect you a lot. So the question is for you. One of the main complaints against atheism from some modern apologists and some people is that atheism is hopeless. As an atheist, where can you gain hope? Not freedom, but hope. And how can you grant that to other atheists and potential atheists within this audience?
Well, it's the presumption that underlies that question, which I'm sometimes faced with in other ways, is that if you thought there was going to be a celestial dictator, that would give you something to hope for. I fail to see why that's the case. As I've given you my reasons, I think that would be a very bleak situation indeed. Just as, well, let me back up for just a tiny second. I wouldn't say that atheism was a morally superior position. I wouldn't say it was a morally inferior one, certainly. But there's a tiny edge that it might possess, and it's this. We can't be accused of wishful thinking at all. We will accept conclusions that may be unwelcome to us. We don't say, well, I won't believe this because if I did, it would mean I'd have to be a pessimist. I mean, that would be absurd. It would be counter-intellectual. I'm not particularly delighted at the thought of my own biological annihilation, of my returning to atoms.
Yeah.
It doesn't like me.
I hear this come up a lot
It's
when I hear
overwhelmingly
Christians talk.
probable thing that the likelihood that I'll be reassembled and we'll have this discussion again in some theme park
I mean, it's sad.
vanishingly small. And if
the idea that, oh, it would just be so horrible if there wasn't a God. Has nothing to do with whether there is or not. Just reality doesn't care what your hopes and dreams are.
Yeah. And as I try to point out, I would accept it if you gave me evidence, regardless of whether I want this God to be real. Whether I think Yahweh is a douche or not, present evidence, and I will believe.
At a certain point, I'll be tapped on the shoulder and told, you have to leave the party now. And you can't come back. And not only that, it's going to go on without you. I don't particularly like that thought, but I think it will happen. On the other hand, if you replace it with the thought, the party's going to go on forever, and Daddy will be watching you at it all the time, and you can never leave. If you find hope in that, I wish you joy of it.
I think, just very briefly, I think to accept unwelcome news makes sense if it is true, but doesn't by itself give one moral credit. Because you could be accepting the unwelcome news, not because it's true, but for all kinds of other reasons. You could be a masochist. You might, as Christopher himself insinuated, not want it to be true. Because if it is true, all kinds of consequences might follow. In other words, I have a chance of going to heaven, but I might end up in hell. I would rather believe there is no heaven and hell, so I can live my life exactly as I want. I don't have to follow all these commandments and codes and so on, and I can, in a sense, abolish moral accountability. I can get rid of moral judgment if I don't have a judge. This is wishful thinking of a different sort. It's wishful thinking that we will not be held accountable for our actions. So, there are two kinds of wishful thinking involved. The wishful thinking that says, I wish I'd make it to heaven, and the wishful thinking that says, I hope there isn't any heaven because I'm having too much fun down here.
Okay, which side are we on?
Because it'll be a lot of fun up in heaven. I promise you that. You already know what you're going to be doing all day.
Got the prayer count going on. All day, every day, forever.
Says, look, that proves there is no God. The Christian looks at the universe and says, look, that proves there is a God. Isn't the true question, do you believe?
Well, that certainly isn't the atheist position. The atheist says that the universe is explicable without any supernatural assumptions. The universe gives you no reason to think, nor does anything else in nature give you any reason to think there's a supernatural dimension. It doesn't prove the non-existence of God because that can't be proven.
The Christian position.
But the proof that there is something that's been attempted by some extremely intelligent people, not exempting my friend and comrade. But there's no satisfactory proof has ever been or ever will be found. It's evidence proof in any case. It's a matter of faith.
In a Newtonian universe where space and time extend indefinitely, infinitely, it's a little difficult to see how the universe could have had a beginning or how a God could have created it. However, with the important discovery in the last century that the universe has a beginning, we have the following argument. It's not a proof, it's an argument, and it appeals to human experience. In our human experience, everything that has a beginning has
They
a
never
cause.
stop gloating about that.
That's proposition
That
number
beginning
one.
part.
Proposition number two, a statement of fact. The universe has a beginning. Conclusion number three, the universe has.
Though this is a cheat because they're just trying to say that their God's eternal. So they're trying to both say that we had a beginning and has the eternal. This is once again theme of the night. Heads
Well,
they win, tails you lose.
I mean, they love the idea that that their Bible says that the universe had a beginning, and then when we found the Big Bang and the steady state hypothesis fell out of favor, then they said, "Oh, look, our Bible predicted it all along."
See, but even if it turns out that there's a multiverse or something else, they're just going to claim that was proof of their God. They're just going to keep on reinterpreting.
But I mean, the Big Bang doesn't necessarily have to be the beginning of anything anywhere. You know, It could be a cyclic cycle. The universe could have expanded and then contracted again an infinite number of times, and
Or it could have been this was all there was. This is all there ever could have been.
that could be. We don't know, but you know, when you're talking the beginning of time in our universe, we know that's wrapped up with space time, but you know, time in
Also,
the
you know what
abstract. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I get excited.
Go ahead.
Do you remember what I remember about that debate with the fire and light? Is that he kept on going to, but what came before the Big Bang? And I kept on saying, I don't know if that's even a valid question. And it kept on being like, well, I know, but hear me out.
Yeah, I'm sorry we don't have a satisfactory answer. I'm sorry, but that's just going to have to do for now, you know.
Exactly. And every time
you tell us
you
where
said
God
I
came
know.
from, and then we'll give you an explanation on where the universe came from.
Exactly. And sometimes you need to accept I don't know is the answer. It doesn't matter how many times you ask me, it's still going to be, well, we don't know. It doesn't like at question 53 of what happened before, it doesn't suddenly become, you know what? All right, it's a God.
What else could it be?
What else could it be? The lack of imagination.
As a cause. 4, the cause could be natural or supernatural. 5, we rule out the natural cause since the universe includes all of nature.
First of all, not a true dichotomy. It would be natural or not natural. Supernatural, once again, a PR term that someone should get a raise for.
Yeah, again, we don't know. So,
Yeah.
You can't say it must, because we can't explain it physically. Therefore, it had to be supernatural. No, it could have a physical explanation. We just don't understand it yet.
Yes, and he's about to rule out nature. He's about to do the whole thing that was doing in the last debate. He's about to say, well, it can't be nature because then it would be outside of it. But no, what would happen is our knowledge of the universe would expand, and that would become the new boundary of what we call nature.
Right. Yep.
Or bring itself into existence. Therefore, there is a supernatural cause. That cause we call God.
1 + 1 = God. We got there.
What are you signaling?
5 minutes. Okay. In your opinion, is a basis for any importance, any speciality, whether we call it rights or dignity? What makes any member of this species, you or I or anyone, special in a species that you say is a physical and biological accident and will inevitably be destroyed by the stars?
This is a very familiar false antithesis, and it's based on an unexamined presumption, which is that it's best put, I think, by Dostoevsky in the Brothers Karamazov. But without God, anything goes, right? You're awarded permission to do as you like. Nothing really matters. The lives and rights of others are unimportant without God. But wouldn't it be, I won't say more true, but at least as true to say that with God, all atrocities and indifferences are also thinkable, sometimes mandated. Some religions order you to enslave people. The Old Testament repeatedly orders you to do it. They order you to mutilate the genitals of children. They order you to be terrified of the menstrual blood of women. They order you to inflict rape and exile and dispossession and torture on other people. You don't have to look far if you open your newspaper and go around the world, just do a quick tour d'horizon and see the ways in which the parties of God enjoin people to behave. In other words, I absolutely reject the grammar of your question, and I also very much resent, as I've told you before, gave you fair warning on this point, very much resent the smug religious assumption that anyone who can mention God has a moral edge on me. Not so. Go back and try again.
Christopher,
No follow-up question.
very briefly, I don't think he meant it in an accusatory way. I think he was asking it perhaps with an example. We're always told, care about the earth, look after the planet, because future generations are going to inhabit it. Now, in some sense, in a Darwinian sense, you could say, well, why should I care about future generations? What have they ever done for me? Why should I? I can care about my children, but I think the Earth's going to be around for them. Eons down the road, if there's global warming and the planet is 5 degrees warmer 500 years from now, who cares? Why should we care? Why should we invest in things?
Which actually is what a lot of people seem to be doing.
I think this question still awaits a full answer. Because I think the atheists are too quick to say we can remove God and leave morality securely in place. In fact, Nietzsche was the one who disputed that. He said, no, you think you can, the point of God is dead was not some crude assertion that God should be cremated or we can't believe in God. It was the consequences of the death of God. Nietzsche was actually talking to atheists. When Zarathustra comes into the public square, the people surrounding him are not religious believers, they're atheists. And Zarathustra says to them, you fools, you don't understand the implications of what you're saying. If God is dead, all the morality that came out of God has to go too. It can last for a little while, but over time it will erode. And
James, if you didn't have the Bible, wouldn't you go around just randomly killing people?
I mean, I don't know what else. What else would you do on a Saturday night when you're bored? You know.
I mean, it all makes sense now. I mean, pillaging, raping, genocide.
Drive a car through a playground to kids.
Wait, no, that is the Bible. Okay, never mind. Okay.
Nietzsche predicted terrible wars in the 20th century that would follow the secularization of European society, and boy, was he an atheist prophet on that score.
But there's a specific Christian school called premillennial dispensationalism, and it's not the only one, that says, who cares about the environment? Who cares about the planet? Who minds
Exactly.
Jesus is coming back. He's coming back real soon. You're wasting your time with.
Now, the intellectuals don't do that, as you saw with Michael Jones, because that's sort of testable. That's sort of a testable hypothesis, you know?
Exactly. Well, some of them get smart and they learn not to put an exact date. They say coming soon, which is kinky. But yeah, exactly. They get shamed every time because it's a great. Well, going back to again PR to say, you know what, June the 5th. It's coming down, and you get everyone scared, and you get a bunch of good sermons out, and you get some money in. But on June the 6th or the 7th, people start to go, wasn't it supposed to be the end of the world? Well, Angel Moroni actually said that it was supposed to be the 13th. And it was supposed to be 4 years from now, and that this was a test. This was just to see that we were truly faithful, and that the real time shall come. And it's like, okay, you're just making this up as you go along, right? Okay.
Now, if you like Michael Jones, he's a very smart man. He'll say, "Oh, all that stuff happened in the past. It's nothing going to happen now, so you can never falsify it." But if it's going to be something that's going to be happening, then at some point it can be falsified.
Yeah, you would think not only would you think it would be falsified, but when they once again come after evolution or the Big Bang or even as abstract as abiogenesis, they demand very, very, very rigorously, highly empirically tested studies, and they will try to use highly empirically tested studies. So it's a constant bait and switch.
Calamity. That if you believed in God, you could be as indifferent to it as you wished. Who said the following about the prospect of a nuclear holocaust, a nuclear extermination of humanity? Who said this about it? The worst it could do would be to move people more rapidly rather than less into a state of futurity to which they're destined in any case.
Wasn't me.
No, it was the Archbishop of Canterbury when there were first protests against Britain testing a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere. There's an ex cathedra statement by the Archbishop. It's a statement that's perfectly congruent with the Christian faith.
Okay, we have time for one more question over here.
Okay, this question is for you, Mr. Hitchens. If there is no God and no higher calling for our lives, then what is the point of life? And not only that, but how can you say that our God is cruel if he gives us a chance for eternal life and for a higher calling?
Well, it's a matter of taste, I suppose. Do you find life more pointful if you regard yourself as a counter in a capricious game where you might be?
So, Amy, I want to make a deal with you.
You might be a baby.
All right, let's make a deal.
All right. If you give me all the money in your bank account, and then I'll let you live forever, you won't have to die. How's that sound?
Oh my God!
I'll even write it out on the contract too, so you have proof.
And all I have to do is just give you all my money? What a deal!
And well, all your money. Then I mean, anything, any possessions in your home over like $50, just pawn those and include that with everything, and then you may be destitute, living in a homeless shelter after that, but at least you'll get to go to heaven, right?
And if you think about it, I can't prove you wrong.
No, prove that I can't do that. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Maybe with AIDS in Africa, You might be a baby who died in childbirth or killed its mother, or you might live long enough to be raped and cudgeled, or you might become a Queen Cleopatra. Any of these things might happen, but it was all according to a divine plan that you couldn't find out anything about. You just had to pray and hope to be lucky. Why is that pointful? Why does that make your life? Why does a faith like that make your life more meaningful? It seems to me to have the very severe risk of making it much less so.
I'd like to highlight two brief points. One of them is we've heard a lot about how cruel God is. And it may be that in some religious interpretations, some of the Islamic ones, for example, God is presented, although admittedly as merciful at the same time, as being a pretty harsh character. Sometimes even the Old Testament God can be portrayed that way. I do think that none of this applies to Jesus. It would be ridiculous to refer to Jesus as cruel in anything he said or did. And moreover, if you look at the essence of Christianity, which is that no matter how bad you've been, no matter what you do, even if you are Charles Manson, ultimately, all that is required of you is to say yes to a sacrifice already committed. In other words, no cruelty, no
Punish
recrimination.
the innocent guy.
You're not going to cut your arms off or your legs off. All that you have to do is accept what Jesus did for you on the cross, and that's it. What could be a lighter requirement? It's like the Garden of Eden. It's a beautiful place. Do whatever you want. Just don't eat from this one tree. But such is the perversity of human nature that tree we've got to go bite out of. And
Man, it would have been a really boring story if it had been like, welcome to Adam and Eve. Adam, Eve, don't eat from this apple. Okay. And then they didn't. The end. And everyone lives happily ever.
By the way, Adam and Eve, I intentionally designed you not to understand the difference between right and wrong anyway, so you actually won't have any culpability for it because you had no clue what you were doing.
Well, I mean, can we just, for one moment, appreciate how silly it is that it is called the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil? I mean, it's basically called Plot Device. Hello, Plot Device. How are you doing, Plot Device Tree? Oh my god, should we eat from the Plot Device Tree?
Yeah, even a lot of
You know
Christians
what?
will say it couldn't be a tree. It had to be it's got to be a metaphor for something else. We don't really know what, but yeah.
I'll tell you what it's a metaphor for. Bullshit. But yes.
It is a metaphor for bullshit, yeah.
It's a metaphor for how to get your children taken away from Child Protective Services. That is the metaphor of that story.
And God had that perfect plan, and that damn talking vegetarian snake with legs thwarted his perfect plan.
Everyone thwarts his plan. The Old Testament is nothing but everyone fucking up Yahweh's day and him being like, I'm gonna get you humans for this.
Why did I make all these people? They're all assholes. I'm going to flood the world, kill them all, and then after that, they'll go right back to being assholes again, but oh well.
But don't worry. The drowning won't invalidate your free will. It's going to be a very free will drowning. You're going to be able to enjoy it while you die. So I'm not violating your free will.
I told Noah to warn them.
Exactly. You know? We told them, and those children didn't listen. Those infants and the babies and the lambs and apparently the animals didn't listen. So screw them.
So if I told you, Amy, I'm going to flood your town, and you don't listen to it, well, hey, your fault.
Exactly. You should have been also, sacrificing an animal and maybe spreading their blood across the above of your door, and then maybe they won't kill your firstborn Egyptian sons, and everything will be peachy. But yeah, biblical morality.
this simple Christian commandment is too much for us. God is too cruel to ask that we just say yes to a free gift. One other thought, and that is, I think when you're asking about the point of life, you're getting back at the question earlier about the practical benefits of atheism and Christianity. If something is not, none of us knows on the basis of reason alone what comes after death. In some senses, you can never fully sort out something that is inherently unknowable. It's on the other side of the curtain. Shakespeare calls death the undiscovered country. So since we don't know for sure, we've got to orient our life one way or the other. We've got to make a choice. So in some senses, the question is, which solution benefits you more? Which gives you more practical payoff? Now, if I had a...
This is Pascal's wager. This is Pascal's wager.
Cancer, and I go to an atheist and say, what do you got for me? The atheist was basically going to say,
I've got reality. I'm sorry it sucks, but that's all I've got for you.
Once again, it doesn't matter what we want. It's about the truth. That's it.
there's no point to it, there's no meaning to it, there's no consolation I have to offer you. Ultimately, this is nature. Get
Tough
used to it.
shit. Yes, exactly.
the
Be an
Christian
adult.
It's different.
You mean I don't get to live forever? No, you don't get to live forever. I'm sorry.
Can't you just enjoy the life that we actually get? That it can be special, unique, amazing. All the words that they want to throw out. We don't have to praise the deity forever.
No purpose in this.
And I
even
mean,
if I don't know what it is.
things are. We only really enjoy things because everything is so finite and so limited. You know, if you ate your favorite food 3 times a day, every day, eventually you'd get sick of it, you know?
Yes, or at the very least, everything seems to have diminishing returns. Is that, you can only like eating, like you said, ice cream for so long between, if you do it every once in a while, it's great. If you start eating ice cream every single day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you might
you're gonna get
not
sick
only
of
get
it.
sick, you might get sick of it, and you're not going to want ice cream anymore. I had a weird moment where I used to eat lots and lots of Wendy's. I still eat a decent amount, but at a certain point, I stopped
You're a
going.
Wendy's girl?
Well, it's close by, and they have
What
a
do you
good deal.
like there? What do you get there usually?
I normally just get like a cheapo burger and chicken nuggets, but they make a great. The 4 for $4 is a great deal because you can't get that at McDonald's. McDonald's, they're like cheapo combos start at $5 or $6.
Yeah,
And,
sometimes they have deals or whatever, but yeah, that 4 for $4 is a good deal at Wendy's.
It is, but at a certain
But yeah,
point,
if you
I ate
ate there
every day, and I just they know me by name and by look because I come like at 11:50 at night, and I have like a very specific order because I don't like any cheese or whatever on it, and they hadn't seen me a while, and I just looked at her because I couldn't even lie, and I'm just like, you ever eat something so much that you just get freaking sick of it? And she was like, yes, I do. And so, yes, exactly. Even the things that you love, if you oversaturate yourself, it's it'll become dull.
United with my son or daughter in a future life.
But I mean, think about eternity. Think about like living forever. In 800 quadrillion years, when you've done everything there is to do trillions of times, what would you have to do anymore? You've asked every question that could be asked. You've gotten everything that could be answered. You've counted all the atoms in the universe. I mean, what would you do?
Well, I don't even know. They don't even go into things interesting. Like heaven is it's never like we're going to go on all these adventures and we're going to go exploring and learning and creating. It's just, it seems, you could, you say praying. I mean, it sounds more like we're metaphorically giving this God oral for the rest of his life. And, I'm great. It's
Right.
fantastic for the first few hours, but I feel like after that, I think it's going to get a little bit boring.
Yeah, you've already praised him every way imaginable, unlimited number of times. But I mean, even if he let you have like a day off once in a while to do your own thing before you go back to praising him, after a while, you'd still do everything there was to do, you know?
Yeah, you'd want to go sightseeing.
Believe them, they're going to give me a very practical sense of benefit and hope. In that sense, Christianity delivers the goods in a way that atheism can't.
Well, I sure don't.
Yeah, we have reality. That's it.
I sure don't see myself visiting the family of someone who's just lost a child and telling them that God wants it that way, and then thinking I'm morally superior for doing that. I sure won't do that. You're quite right. And you're wrong about Jesus of Nazareth, Dinesh, it seems to me. There is no hell in the Old Testament. Strange but true. At least not in any of the canonical books. God may order a lot of genocide and enslavement and torture and rape and dispossession, but once all these people have been destroyed and had their lives and their civilizations obliterated and the earth has covered them, that's it. There's no punishment of the dead. For infinite torture, for torture that goes on forever, you have to go to the Nazarene, who says that those who don't accept his gentle and meek and mild preachments can depart into everlasting fire. Again, something in me resists being spoken to in that tone of voice. If we get this lady's question, we'll have answered everybody's. Sure. That would be wonderful. It hardly ever happens. Come on.
I really don't have a question. I just kind of have a statement. I just answer what you had asked earlier. I do believe that something that a Christian can do that a non-Christian atheist cannot do is to lead someone to Christ or to an eternal heaven, to salvation.
No, we said a good thing.
Whereas an atheist or someone who's a non-believer.
Yeah, why would we want to lead somebody to Christ? Why would we want to lie to somebody?
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
We offer reality. You offer pipe dreams.
Comment, Mr. Hitchens.
It doesn't quite respect the terms of the question, but I appreciate the thought anyway.
Okay, thank you both.
Especially the thought that I'm going to hell. A moral statement if ever I've heard one.
Play Highway to Hell. We're on the highway to hell.
Let's take this opportunity to thank both of these gentlemen for being here with us
hell.
tonight.
Not sure. Okay, I think that looks like the end. Okay, it looks like interviews with them. But, okay. So...
Well, it's been a while since I watched any Hitchens debate.
I know that it was great to hear from him again because it's been a few years.
And I'm pretty confident for his sake he's not in hell.
I am too. I want to be worm food. I think I will spend a lot of my time eating other organisms, and one day my body will hopefully do the same, and I'm okay with that. To me, it's very Lion King.
Well, I hate to tell you, but even if you weren't okay with it, it's still gonna happen.
There you go, exactly, 100%. Yeah,
I mean, this debate, it really just no evidence for God, just pontificating that if he's not real, that would really suck. That would be that'd be a bummer, you know?
It'd be a real bummer. And I feel like he defeated his points a bunch of times. He's like, let's just assume that we're just here where consciousness is just in our brain. And man, that would suck. It's like, well, what can I tell you? Yeah, he brought up the lawful thing. He brought up lawful a bunch at the beginning in his opener, but he kind of dropped that point. Trying to see any of my notes. He said he kind of went away from the Bible, but there was that whole. He tried to sneak in the 10 Commandments in there, like Like I said,
Oh, they're all common sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You already know they're all wrong
Marino.
before they were even written down. I think it was Sam Harris. I think he said someone asked him like, so if people want to believe in God, why do you care? Why would you want to tell them that God's not real or whatever? And he's like, well, I think it was him. He said, so if one of your friends came up to you and they're like talking about their new girlfriend, and it's like, yeah, my new girl, she's Angelina Jolie, and we're going to get married, and she's in love with me. And it's like, but, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. What are you talking about? It's like, yeah, no, we're going to get married. We're in love. Like, yeah.
It's like maybe you should reevaluate your belief system.
I mean, would you just tell them, "Oh, that's great. I'm so glad to hear it." Oh wow, you're gonna marry you're gonna marry a movie star. Wow.
Well, it's like, do you want to live your life thinking that you're going to get $1 million when you turn 60 or whatever age you want to pick, even though you have no evidence to believe that? And so now you've accumulated all this debt and you've lived this amazing lifestyle off a credit card and all this stuff. And the time comes and there's no money. And then you either deal with reality or you go crazy.
And this is actually like one of the hidden dangers of dispensationalist Christianity is, I think it for Christians who think the end is coming soon, I mean, it really kind of takes away the motivation to try to make the best out of yourself in this life, because you're not planning on being here all that much longer. Now, if you are totally convinced that within 10 years Jesus is going to come back and all this shit will just be a waste anyway, and you really, really believe that, you're going to say that wouldn't affect how you live your life and the choices you make and your future plans if you're totally not planning on even being here?
It's like imagining that you have one sandwich and a week to break it up, but you think that the sandwich fairy is going to bring you sandwiches at night, and so you gobble the sandwich down. I mean, it doesn't matter what your belief is. You have to deal with the reality of the situation, or
you go to like a very expensive restaurant, like Morton Steakhouse, where it's like $70 for a steak and whatever, and you rack up a huge meal, and then you're thinking that the bill is never going to come because the bill fairy is just going to poof and make it disappear. Then when that bill comes to the table, you're going to be in trouble because shit.
You're going to be sweating. And we got no really good reasons. I think he said the answer to if your 12-year-old asks you if God exists is to say the words morality. Why does God exist? Morality. Well, okay, morality. That's what I got out of that answer.
And I mean, like we said before, I don't know of any. I mean, everyone doesn't agree on the fine points of morality, but I think everybody has a sense that, even though I don't look to the Bible for my morality, I think I have a pretty decent compass of what's right and what's wrong. It's like Mr. Batman when he goes around asking like, well, why is it wrong to molest children? Why would that be wrong? Well,
I can answer those questions.
Yeah, I don't need the Bible to tell me why that's wrong. It's, it can do lots of those kind of relationships with children can do lots of harm to their development, their psyche. It can cause them long-term problems. It's not good. So I don't need a book to tell me it's not a good, thing that we don't want to allow. If you want to say, oh, well, it's because of what the book says, as long as we get to the same point where we understand each other, that's fine, but you don't need to get there through the book.
Well, the fact that he even thinks that that's a gotcha is scary. Like,
yeah, because
it's illegal for multiple reasons. You understand it harms children. It's not because of Jeebus, right?
It's like if it wasn't in the book, then everyone would go out just trying to rape kids.
It makes sense.
It's a ridiculous proposition.
Honestly, James, I get it now. Now I understand. We can end child rape. We can end slavery in all sorts of different third world countries. We can end world hunger right now. We just need to pass out Bibles. In fact, we should go and pass out Bibles in places where they're easily accessible and where people are sleeping. If we could just get people to put Bibles in hotel rooms, I feel like clearly everything would be better and there wouldn't be any problems in the world.
I mean, we could give a free Bible to sex offenders, instead of locking them up, just
put
give
them in
a
jails.
Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
all right.
We'll just lock them up long enough to read the Bible, and then after that, I guess they can go out because they won't be a danger to anybody anymore.
Or give them lighter sentences if they said they found Jesus. That might help. That actually may help.
Yeah, it could help. I mean, you've only served 5 months out of 10 years, but you said you found Jesus, so I think we're good to go.
It's true. In fact, you stabbed a guy in an eye, and then you kind of thought his leg was tasty, but it's okay. Once again, we could get as ridiculous, really, as we want because it really is. All you need to do is find Jesus.
Well, it's like Ken Hovind. He used to claim that his DVDs or videos saved Jeffrey Dahmer. That he converted Jeffrey Dahmer to Christianity, and
that's fair to his victims, right? His victims may be burning in hell.
They could be, yeah. Well, he picked up gay men, so you'd have to assume most of them would be in hell, right?
He may be saved, and the people he killed may be burning. Maybe,
but yeah.
I'm sorry. You were saying
no. I was just because and there's there's different things going on about that with his claim like that. Like other people are saying, no, that's not true, because people who knew Jeffrey Dahmer in prison, before he died, and they would say, he would make crude remarks to the guards about, eating them or consuming human flesh and stuff like that, just to be, that he didn't experience some life altering change where he, became a completely new person and he, completely renounced, all the terrible things that he had done.
Of course, the people don't change like that. It's generally from an experience. People get a little bit wiser sometimes when maybe they get hit in the back of the head, literally or metaphorically. But it's and another point that he brought up was fine tuning. That we're just here because, oh my God, it's so amazing that we're here, and if the laws of physics were just a little bit different, isn't it so amazing that we wouldn't be here? And it's like, no, that's about what we'd expect. I don't know why they obsess over so-called fine tuning.
We evolved to live on the planet. That's evolution.
Yes, it looks like, you're growing a plant. You put sunlight in, and add some soil and a little water. You get some life.
Life on Earth looks like this, like the way it is, because anything different wouldn't survive. It would die. So it didn't reproduce. The only things that reproduced were the ones that happened to be suited for life here.
Yeah. And it'll go on that way until the star red giants and gobbles up Earth. But until that time,
and they'll still be waiting for Jesus to come back.
They really will. If Christianity lasts that long, they will continue to wait for Jeebus to come back.
I mean, although they did say that thing about how I'm sure they'd get a workaround because the graves were supposed to open up when he comes back, and if the sun goes red giant and incinerates the whole earth, I don't know, unless they would dig up every grave and take the bodies with us to a new planet.
Yep.
I don't know. Or they'll just say, God can do it by magic.
Magic solves everything.
There you go.
And okay, so before I guess we finish, just want to say that there's gonna be, I'm setting up a fun guest hosting with S. Glovell. I'm not sure how. I think it's Glovell or something close to that. I'm gonna get him on, and we're gonna talk some intelligent design or supernatural versus the natural. Have a nice, friendly conversation, and
science versus the magic wand. Let's see who wins.
Exactly. And I actually I want to talk with this afterwards, James. But I have an interesting. I feel like there's gonna start becoming an atheist or a skeptic Bible study. I feel like that is gonna be coming up soon. So more fun stuff.
Like where we just read things in the Bible.
I think I own a Skeptic's Annotated Bible.
Yeah, I heard you mention that.
Yeah, I feel like we should just go by and we should like read chapter by chapter and read the comments that he makes and comment on them, because he has some funny things. Maybe like an atheist Bible study. We'll see. But yeah, so any final thoughts? And well, okay. But it was a awesome debate. I love Christopher Hitchens. He's so charming. He seems to win over even the people that that he goes against. He always seems like the kind of guy that would have a beer with the theists after the debate, and that's the kind of person I want to be.
Exactly. You're not trying to destroy people, and
exactly. Have good conversation. Let the truth prevail, right?
All we're trying to do is just plant little seeds of doubt in their mind, and when they sprout, nature will take its course. That's the way to do it.
I could not agree more. Okay. So with that, I think that's going to conclude tonight's debate with Christopher Hitchens versus Dinesh D'Souza. I want to thank Sam for coming on early, and I want to thank James for sticking around having fun.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you shortly.
We'll see you again.
Stream, yeah.